1 minute. I think Jane and Kathy might be in the audit committee meeting. I'd like to call the November 16th monthly work session to order. First on the agenda is capital budget.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to see everyone. Our operations department is here, and Mr. Dumas is going to lead this part of the session.
Okay, well, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about all things capital budget this morning. So I've got two people here with me today, Diane Caminati, our acting Director of Planning, and Jane Dreger, our Director of Construction Services. First, I guess I'd like to talk a little bit about timeline with the capital budget. You know, we come before the board several times a year to discuss capital budget and its development. At this time of the year, we normally come with what I would call a minor update. We typically talk about project status, we talk about any changes in funding, and kind of any feelings in terms of what the board is seeing out there, things we may not be focused on and we need to. So that's typically the update at this particular time. A reminder, this capital budget is adopted over the course of the summer, and so you've got between now and that time to kind of review, make modifications. We'll come before you several times as we move into the spring, certainly as we finalize budget. Again, moving into that adoption over the summer. This I would call a much more comprehensive update than we've ever given at this time of the year, at least as far as I can remember. A couple reasons for that. One, as a reminder, we just completed 40-day counts across the district, and so one of the things we're starting to look at in our district plan, our capital plan, is addressing growth again. We haven't done that in a number of years, but we're starting to grow. And if you remember, the conversation through COVID was, how are we going to recover from COVID? What does that look like at our schools? Are kids coming back, and at what rate are they coming back? And we had our projections, and we laid out in our capital budget the last time you saw it, a new K-8 on Lorraine Road to kick off sometime this year, and then a new high school at Wellin Park and a new K-8 at Wellin Park a couple of years out, based on our projections. So one of the updates we wanted to give you now is, what are we looking at coming out of 40-day count? What is student growth looking like, just to confirm, are we right? Do we need to move things around? So that's one piece of today, and you have some read ahead on that, and I'll let Diane speak to that a little bit. So that's one goal for today, is to kind of confirm growth. What does that look like? What are we seeing? And do we have the projects placed right in our capital plan? So that's one goal for today. The other big piece is that's caused a major rewrite of the capital plan is just construction pricing and scoping of projects. So two things I will mention, and that's what Jane will talk to these items. One, if you remember last year, you allowed us to go out for a condition assessment on all of our school buildings, and we appreciated that because that gives us real data about what's going on in all of our buildings. Our last one was like 10 years ago, and so it needed to be updated. What Jane and her team have done is really dug into that condition assessment report in relation to everything we're doing in the district, because our goal is always, when we get to a school site, try to address everything we can at one time, not have to go back several times, bring on several contractors, disrupt what's going on campus. Again, we called it kind of lumping projects together when they made sense at one particular time and getting it all done. So Jane has gone through that condition assessment based on all of our projects in the 5-year plan. That's been a big feat, but really tried to identify what are the things in the condition assessment that the project was not addressing, and then do we need to do them at that particular time, and what does that mean for scope? So that's one big change you're seeing in some of the projects. And Jane will talk more specifically about those on the projects. The other piece, and maybe it was about a month and a half ago, we've talked about construction pricing in the last several times we met with you, concerned about what that looks like. And we typically escalate, once we get a budget, we escalate at about 10% a year. Jane and I were talking probably about a month ago, and are comparing a brand new school that had just gone to GMP contract in Lee County, a K-8, very much like we want to build on Lorraine Road, about the same size. And our budget, currently sitting in our capital budget for the K-8 on Lorraine Road, was right about $55 million. When Jane and I talked and she told me about the price that just went to GMP in Lee County was basically $79 million, after she picked me off the floor for a heart attack, when I say we, I mean Jane and her team, really started looking at every budget in the 5-year plan based on that current pricing, our most realistic pricing right now, and redoing all the projects so that we had an accurate budget based on today, and then escalating out from there. And so those two changes, scope based on condition assessment and current pricing in the construction industry, have forced a lot of changes in our budget, and we've had to move some things around. And so we've done that. We reworked the entire capital budget for you to look at today. So again, there are a lot of changes here. There's a lot of scope changes, things we want to walk through on every project with you. Again, we've got time on this capital budget. We're bringing it to you probably 5-6 months earlier than we normally would. At this time, we typically would not bring the 5-year. We'd talk about some things. We'd bring the 5-year usually in March or April for you to first look at it. But we needed to bring it to you early because of all these scope changes and what we're planning on doing with the brand new K-8. So that's kind of the goals of today. Talk about growth and talk about the changes in the 5-year plan. And with that, if there's no initial questions, I'm going to turn it over to Diane to talk about the growth. Go ahead, Bridget.
Yeah, sorry, just real quick. When you looked at was it Lee County? Do you look at it cost per square foot or student station? Both. Okay. And they're comparable? Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so with that, Diane, you want to talk a little bit about Mid-County and South County growth?
Yeah, so you should have received a read ahead outlining growth, enrollment, and capacity. We're focusing really on Central and South County right now because that's where a lot of growth is happening and where our schools are over capacity. So to break that down a little bit, some of the developments, Sky Ranch, that's where our school is located, or our site is located. Right next to that, it's in the Lakeview Elementary, Sarasota Middle, and Riverview High School zone. Lakeview is already, according to our 40-day counts that we just completed, Lakeview is over capacity by 91 students. Its adjacent school, Ashton, is over, and this is permanent capacity, over permanent capacity by 297 students. So we are looking to start architect and engineer and getting a construction manager on board in January for design on that new K-8 in Central County.
Yeah, Diane, thank you. And so if you remember, that K-8 was originally in the budget for this year. We had talked about starting it over the summer, but then wanted to wait for 40-day count to see what that confirmed. And again, that has confirmed we're growing pretty heavily in Mid-County. And so when you look at this budget, the borrowing for it and the revenue for the borrowing is moved into next year, and that's only because of the time frame. We plan to go out for selection here in January, but we don't need to borrow till over the summer. So the borrowing has been adjusted just because we don't want to borrow too early, and they can reimburse us for some of the initial costs. So the funding on the new K-8 in Lorraine Road is moved to next year, but it's only because of the timeline in the year that we're going to it. It's basically, it's the same time frame, but we don't need to do the borrowing ahead of time. We can do it right after we go to contract. So Diane, South County.
And then again, in South County, Wellin Park is building out. They still have another 17,000 units to build, and that's creating about 3,876 students from our student generation rate. Our schools there, Taylor Ranch, Venice Middle, Venice High, and to the north of Taylor Ranch, Laurel Nokomis, because some of these developments in South County along Palmer Ranch at 681 are also affecting our schools. Laurel Nokomis saw an increase of 183 students this year from that development. Taylor Ranch is already 87 students over permanent capacity, and then our major school of concern is Venice High with 296 students over permanent capacity.
So as we talk about Wellin Park, in our analysis based on, again, 40-day count, real numbers, we made a decision to pull the high school in earlier. And so we would be looking to fund that high school at another heart attack of $150 million to build that high school this coming summer. Because of growth in that area, and again, because of what we're seeing at Venice High School, that again is a 3-year build. So when we say we're pulling the trigger this summer, remember we're still out 3 years before we can put kids on that campus at least, and so that's our concern. And then in looking at the K-8, reflecting on what's going on in Taylor Ranch, we're looking at, in this budget, funding the K-8, not this coming summer, the following summer. So we would have 3 brand new schools under construction. The current K-8 we're going to start now will be under construction, looking at the high school under design this summer, and the K-8 in Wellin Park the following summer under design. So a lot going on, but again, based on real numbers on the 40-day count where we're sitting right now. So questions on the growth pieces we're seeing across the district, or where we've kind of placed those in the capital plan?
Did you have a chance to look at the redistricting map? I thought we sent it over to you or Diane.
Oh, no.
Oh, never mind, it didn't come. But we'll look at that, because I would like to see, because there's some numbers off. And I want to see where the new growth is on this map, but I'll talk to you later so we could perhaps tweak it a little tighter. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I have a quick question. When we look at, and I know we've talked about this in the past, but what's the capacity, or where are we at with Northport High?
I don't have Northport available, but I can get that information to you.
And that was more on the Wellin Park, I mean, where it is, and I think it's districted, correct me if I'm wrong, it's districted to Venice High.
Correct.
But as we look at, and again, I think it's interesting, I was like, hope we aren't, no disrespect to Manatee County, but I think they opened up three schools at one time too, and then I hear us at the same point. So have we evaluated that in the price increases and such to where we're at capacity wise? I don't know that may be a temporary solution, but, and again, redistricting is very difficult, so wasn't sure.
Yeah, in terms of moving some of the capacity down to Venice High. I'm sorry, yeah, Northport High, yeah. So, that's something we considered in the past. We've looked at that because of the rate of growth. What we're worried about is that's a really quick stopgap measure, and we're going to have to build a school anyway. Again, I think it's the rate of growth that prohibits us from doing that. If we could do that and then get 5, 6, 7 years before we have to build, I think it would make some sense. But because we push it off a year or two, it doesn't make sense at this point to the team to say, do that first and then delay. We might as well get it built. Does that make sense?
And development in Northport is harder for us to monitor because of the platted lots. I had just gotten a report recently from the city of Northport. They had 269 COs, so closeouts, on single-family residences in a 4-month period. So that's pretty substantial.
Thank you. Jane?
Well, I know that most people in Wellin Park go to Venice High, and of course, that's where we're seeing the impact. But I want to make sure that we look at that inset area in Inglewood. We always have that issue that comes up. And let me tell you something. These people don't want to go to school. A majority of them do not want to go to school in Charlotte County. They've gone to Inglewood Elementary. They believe that our schools are better. We have better facilities, better programs, better services for students. And they want to go to a Sarasota County school, and rightfully, they should be able to. So I think we need to take that into consideration, because there's a lot of growth in that area. That's an area that's closest to me. And then I think that there's just some concern with people in Wellin Park that they might be rezoned to Northport, and they really don't want to be. And I don't understand that, but it is a lot further. It is a lot further away. So I think anything that we can do to move that school forward, even at greater cost, I think is a really good thing. And looking at this report, I think that you all have done a great job. I just suggested to Jody yesterday that when we look at the age of the schools, that we break that into elementary, middle, and high school, because I think there is some differences there as to the newness of our high schools, for example, which are all in great shape. And I think in terms of my friend Eric Jackson, who's now in a not great school in Connecticut, and he's told me on several occasions, what a difference a school district makes in terms of how that sometimes impacts learning. But at any rate, I think that we have so many things to be proud of in terms of what we've built and how we're building schools. So I'm really looking forward to this next phase, even as expensive as it's going to be.
Yeah, no, I agree. And back to the Venice High conversation about redistricting, the Charlotte County students that go, Sarasota County students that go to Charlotte County schools, that's absolutely part of the conversation. And so we know when we create, we've got the overcapacity at Venice High, but we'll also need to consider that pocket of students too if they want to come back. And so this is part of the conversation as we move into the high school. What do the zones look like, providing an opportunity for parents to come back to the Venice High if they'd like to. Absolutely.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So that's growth. And so what I'd like to do is then transition over to Jane and have her kind of dig into the construction costs, markups, things we're seeing in the market. And then if there are no questions on that, she can transition. We'll talk project specifics. Because the other thing I didn't mention is not only are project budgets growing, but project approach has changed in a couple of examples as we started to look at, for example, one of the, I think, really good analysis that has been done by Jane and her team is Garden Elementary. We had several renovations programmed into the 5-year plan at Garden Elementary. Once Jane looked at that and then included some of the other items that we weren't considering on campus, the cost of those projects drive us very close to being able to replace that school. And so we've changed our approach to presenting a proposed brand new school for Garden Elementary. So I'll let Jane kind of talk through some of those project approaches too. So Jane?
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. I want to thank you for the opportunity to talk about this so early in the phase. Like Jody was saying, it's really nice for staff to be able to share rather than bringing a project to you that all of a sudden is way over budget or is going to take a lot longer. So I'm very appreciative for the opportunity to talk to you early in the process. If you've been out shopping, you know the world as it is today. There are supply chain interruptions everywhere you go. If you've ordered furniture, if you've ordered electronics. So kind of what we're seeing in the construction industry is there seems to be waves of shortages. So about 6 months ago, we couldn't get lumber. Sheets of plywood were $80 a sheet. Some crazy things were happening. We've seen lumber taper off. Now we're seeing sharp spikes in steel and electronic components, really long lead items, and just now starting to see crazy lead times for electrical components. At one point, we were hearing 50-week lead items for electrical components and startup gear. So I made the comment to the electrical folks, when it's that close to a year, don't divide it into weeks. Tell us it's a year. But it's been kind of the perfect storm. So we had COVID, we had shutdowns, we had a couple of hurricanes impact some key manufacturing hubs in our country and other countries. We had fires in China and Louisiana. We had the Suez Canal closure. We have containers backed up in California. We have truck driver shortages. So it's just kind of a confluence of all these factors. But the flip side of that is we're pretty good at planning in construction. We always have a plan B. I think we're about to plan H right now, but we're looking at all options and all suggestions. And if you all are thinking of things that you may have done in your personal life or your professional life outside of here, we'd be happy to hear them because really we're looking at everything. And so A couple of things that I highlighted in your read ahead is we're having our contractors submit multiple products in the approval process so that when we're ready to release those materials, we can figure out which ones are the most cost effective and or the most available. We're considering dividing projects into phases where we bite off a little bit now and we get those things under contract and we procure long lead items and then we come back and finish in the project. Again, there's some risks, but there could be some rewards. The risks are, if things continue to increase when you get to the point where you're contracting, then you would obviously have to pay more. If they level off or decrease, then you would gain from that benefit. And so we're kind of looking at those. And one of those that we just looked at is Booker. So we brought to you a demolition partial GMP to get some things ordered so that we didn't miss key dates to order materials. And now we're going to be bringing you a GMP for the rest of the project. The other thing is we're reviewing our design guidelines to make sure that we are in every area we're able to. We're providing for good competition in the industry. We're monitoring the CM's pre-qualification process closer than we have before because what we're seeing is some subcontractors bid the job, then cannot do the job for the price that they've quoted, and they're going out of business. So we really want to be sure that we're using the very best subcontractors that we can. And then we talked about it a little with what Jody said is we're trying to help you all with data so that we can prioritize and do the most important projects for you all. And we're also considering alternative building products, things we haven't thought of before. The Director of Facilities and I went up to Bay County. We looked at, they're using the insulated concrete forms. That's basically a styrofoam concrete form. You pour the concrete in and you'll leave it, and you continue to pour all the way up. It is a little faster because it's a newer building product. It's not as jammed up in the supply chain right now as some of the conventional construction methods. We just had a workshop this morning with their technical teams and our Goshio team. So we're looking at that for Goshio, the addition there. So those are kind of some of the things that we've come up with. Again, we're trying to leave no stone unturned. But those are the things that I wanted to highlight to you to make sure that you guys understand that we are really trying to have plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and E. So the next takeaway. You want me to
Any
go
questions on the construction pricing piece, kind of the overall industry or anything like that? Okay.
So for the construction projects, so I wanted to highlight the ones that were in the current capital plan that really were impacted the most. And so in the bullet you see, and Jody talked about, we did the comprehensive facility assessment, which was very wise of you. It's good to have data to support some of the things that you're trying to accomplish. We've also worked with facilities to find out what are their schools where they're having the most work orders, the most work they're putting the most money into, and what are the problems at those campuses, and is that something that we can correct, fix, mitigate when we're there doing a comprehensive renovation project. And then we worked with planning staff to figure out where we're going to need projects. So with that, we'll dig into the project by project, and I'll try to give you a highlight, like a Reader's Digest version of each project that we discovered. So at Bay Haven, that is a phased renovation of the historic building number 1. Some of the things that we added to the scope were in the Jacobs assessment. There were some structural components that needed to be addressed. There were some plumbing pieces, fixtures, and piping that needed to be replaced. And then we hadn't included furniture, fixtures, and equipment in there. So in all of these projects where we have a comprehensive renovation, we've looked at it to see when we're done renovating those classrooms, are they going to need new desks, chairs, furniture? And so those were the things that we considered at Bay Haven. Did I miss anything at Bay Haven? Oh, adding portables on a really postage stamp site
Yeah, so
Are these new capital plan costs including the furniture and fixtures, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So everywhere on the scope that I wrote, FF&E, I wrote either new or partial, because in some cases they have some furniture and it's good and they can use it when they have a new. So it's either all new or partial, or I didn't include it.
we're really trying to do a much better job, hopefully moving forward, of managing FF&E furniture in the district. You know, we've never done a good job, honestly, of managing it. And a lot of times we get to the point in a project where the principal says, hey, where's my new furniture? And we say, well, that's not in the scope. You need to go talk to Chris Renoff or Brandon Johnson about, can they help you out with money for that? It's really not the right place to be. So we're trying to do a better job of managing furniture. We've got Tracy Brizendine from purchasing, also in the warehouse, who warehouses our surplus furniture. So, for example, when we were bringing in new portables this year, making sure that we looked at the furniture and the portables. If we didn't have the correct furniture, making sure it was on order. So when portables got there, the furniture went in. So hopefully doing a much better job with the team about managing that FF&E, but it's all about having the budget available when you need it. So we're including that in the projects. And Bay Haven is a project that in these market conditions is scary with pricing because of general conditions, and that will drag because that's a very slow, methodically phased project because of the tightness of campus, and so that has a potential to be an issue as we look at pricing over the course of a couple of years. So, go ahead, Jane.
The next one we went to was Fruitville. We were looking at a renovation of Building 5. When we started to look at Building 5 and its condition, it really made sense to replace it with a more compact building. They had just gotten a new building 12 years ago or so.
I think a couple of years ago, maybe 5.
Oh, 5. Building number 10. So we talked about would it be possible to just replicate Building 10 on the campus, and what would that gain us? And with the age of the building and the condition of the building, we thought that was a really good idea. So that's what we're recommending here, is that they get an addition. With that addition will be some covered walkways that are sorely needed on that campus, and possibly some parking reconfigurations to help
And
with
I
the
noticed that
traffic.
one's 26, 27, so perhaps cost might come down by then.
Potentially,
And
what
what goes up must come down, and not
Hopefully.
necessarily in pricing.
hopefully, we had an awesome walk around with Dusty French out there, the principal, and walking campus. Our team was out there not too long ago, and just looking at Building 5, having a conversation. Then the data that Jane has based on the condition assessment. The right thing for that campus is not to remodel half a building. The right thing is to put a new wing out there. And so I think we're excited about. I think Dusty's excited about what that'll look like on campus. So I think that's going to be a great project for them.
Quick question. Do you guys, when you said to replicate Building 10, so do we own the drawings so we don't have to pay additional A&E costs?
We will have to pay for the site specifics for that building, so where all the infrastructure comes in.
Okay.
We would likely hire the same architect that did that to do that, hire that civil engineer, and then we would use them for all of the construction administration, approving shop drawings and submittals and providing record drawings.
Also at the Fruitville site, we probably all received an email from the pastor of the church across the street, and their parking lot is often used for overflow parking and for parent pickup. Is there a way that we could enter into a contract where we could, lease their parking lot for part of the year or something to help them pay for the maintenance of it?
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Absolutely. We've done maintenance on their campus in the years past because of the parking that's going on over there. We were as part of the tour, we were there for drop off. That's not just lightly used. That is, you can't tell the difference between that and a school drop off area on our property. It's heavily used. I think the parents are respectful, but it's heavily used. And so yes, we've made the contact, and we're going to work with the church to make sure
and they're willing to work with us because during the weekday they're not using it anyway, but it is the maintenance of it that they would like to have our assistance with.
And that's why this project makes a lot of sense, because potentially we can pick up more staging area, parking area on campus, and then not have to use the church parking lot anymore long term. So I think it'll be a win-win.
One thing that I notice for me personally is that we have start dates but no projected end dates. And if I could, is it reflective on debt service or no? Okay, so what my concern is that where the vicissitudes of peaks and valleys are in terms of where costs could go out of control and multiple projects at the same time. So and plus, Mrs. Corcoran is leaving us, and all of that is a concern. So I just, it's always good to feel good about what we're trying to accomplish and make things, but I'm a little concerned about the downside.
As are we. Good point. And we can absolutely do that. We will lay the projects out in terms of start and estimated finish time for you, and so you can see the overlap. No, that's absolutely a conversation that Jane and I have all the time. One, about staffing the projects. I mean, these are big projects. Construction's not a big department. That's one. Two, depleting the subcontractor market pretty quickly. You get multiple HVAC contractors under contract. You all of a sudden can't bid this next one, so we're worried about that. So absolutely, and so we'll lay all those out for you because it's something we talk about all the time. It's a great question.
Are we ready to talk about Garden? Okay. So Garden was one where we had I think it was a $12 million HVAC renovation of the main building in current years. And then we had a $14 million addition. It's had 18 portables out there, and it's had a steady enrollment that has occupied those 18 portables. That was in 25-26. We had a $1.1 million fix the drainage issue because it's a campus that does flood. And then we had some facilities had some roofing projects, replacing underground piping and some other things. When we looked at the total of all of those, it ended up being about $32 million. So we looked at, let's figure out what that 10-year cost of that facility would be if we just looked at the Jacobs report to try to validate the numbers. We did that, and we found that with the current deficiencies and 1 to 5 year life cycle cost and 6 to 10 year life cycle costs, and then plus the addition and escalation, they were at 32.7. So we felt pretty comfortable that was the 10-year cost of that facility. If we replace on that site, which we laid it out and it will fit, that's a nice big site. We could do the current permanent capacity for around 30 million. We could do current capacity plus portable capacity, and have it be larger depending on the needs of growth in that area. So we looked at a couple scenarios on site of that, and using the square foot number that we heard from our neighbors to the south. And then we looked at replacing it on the Indian Hills property so that we could build it on another site and move them. Any of those are doable. And so what we did is we put it on the capital plan projected in year 24-25 at 40 million. We counted that as the escalation for the years between.
Yeah, absolutely. And so given the fact that we're going to be building a brand new building, the other thing it does with revenue, it allows us to go for COPS on that particular building. And so when you see it in your budget here, that 40 million is planned to be borrowing for that campus. Again, some really, I think, fun options to kind of consider as a board is, do we rebuild on the current site, which is potentially not a problem to do, or do we go to a green site at Indian Hills, which is just down the road, build there, and then we've got the current garden site to either sell or do whatever we want with it. So nothing we need to decide today, just thoughts down the road we need to consider. But I think for that campus, and again, as part of this conversation, we also had Chris Renoff and Brennan Johnson in the conversation, and they've looped the principal in at this point that this is what we're thinking. So I think a good project for Garden down the road, and it gets us a set of buildings that are kind of antiquated into a brand new building. So
Quickly, have you done a cost analysis on what it would be if we, let's say, sold the site, if we built on the other? Does that put us neutral in any way?
So that we would have to get an appraisal on the site. So we have not done that, Tom, but certainly, the Indian Hills site has been a vacant property for a long time. In the title on the Indian Hills property, which we'd have to get changed to sell, it does designate it has to be used for school purposes. But we had contemplated selling that site for years because it's kind of just sitting there. Either way, I think either we take a look at what Indian Hills becomes. Is it workforce housing, something like that? Do we sell it? Do we move Garden there, and then that frees up the Garden site? Then we can potentially sell that site and pick that revenue off of that. I think they're both sitting in areas where they're prime property for development, and so yeah, we can use that to offset some of that cost of the new building. Absolutely.
And second question, can you preserve the rock garden for a garden. I'll let
We'll leave that up to Jane. She can try and get that done for you.
Jody, on the garden site as it stands right now, if we were to, let's say, build on the Indian Hills, correct?
Correct.
On that site, and then possibly sell the garden site, would we have to demolish the building to sell it, or is that something we would sell with the building on it?
My thought is, and this is only a thought, and this is a wild guess, that it would be more valuable out the building. And in the construction costs, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Jane, you've included demolition of the current buildings
Right.
in either case.
Right. Okay. And then besides that, the garden property, if we were to build on the garden property, we would obviously need fill to build on that property, and then to possibly sell the Indian property, Indian Hills. Yeah.
Yeah, our Garden Elementary, it's just there's no elevation there. It sits below the road. You can't get rid of the water quick enough.
Right.
So, okay, Jane.
So the next one is Laurel Nokomis. We didn't do a lot of work on this because we are in the process of doing the sister school re-roof right now, and that's the Booker Middle School. We have the construction documents nearly complete, so we will be out to bid on that here in the next month or so. So in the next month or so, we'll have a really good number and a better understanding. But it will include the new roof and the structural supports, the design and owner services for that roof. The new K-8, I think we talked about that. We included the 1,500 student K-8 prototype that we've been talking about. This one is actually going to be, we made the note that this one's going to be a designated hurricane shelter because of its location. And so I'm not sure what else I can share with you on that we did.
I will say that led by Jane, actually, we've got a K-8 team that's meeting with Dr. Asplin to talk about what that looks like, size. I think we've kind of nailed down size at this point. We're going to tour some K-8 models that we can use in our district and kind of select a model. So I think Dr. Asplin's vision is that we select a K-8 model that we can build quickly and for as low as cost as possible. So we're in the process of our team doing that at this point.
this expenditure or the increase, is that purely from supply chain and cost elevations? Escalations?
No.
Okay,
I think initially we had envisioned a much smaller K-8. And what we've learned is that it really doesn't make sense unless you have about 450 to 500 middle schoolers. So the size of the school has grown pretty significantly. We had started out at 1,100 students, and now we're up to 1,500 students.
And I think that that's kind of mirroring Dr. Asplin's vision for what the sweet spot is with a K-8. Am I right, Dr. Asplin?
Yes, I think the sweet spot is right around 1,500. That's just based on my experience and having 8 K-8s in the other group. But the elementary piece would be probably around 800, 900. But middle school really needs to be around 400 students. 400 students, so that we have all of the programs that we have at the other middle schools. When you start getting to around 200 in a middle school, 200 students in middle school, you can't have as many of the programs that you have in the other middle schools. And we don't want to do that because the people who are going to be going to the new school need as much opportunity as the people that would be in the regular middle school. So I think it's important that we try to build it at 1,500, yes.
And I think from our perspective, the good news is that Dr. Asplin thinks 1,500 is a sweet spot versus, say, 1,100, because growth in the area, 1,500 is a better number for us at that particular site. And in fact, we didn't think we were going to have to do this, but we are currently going to be looking for an additional site between this school, south of this school, east of the interstate, and north of Laurel Nokomis, because as Diane and team do the projections out based on what's being built out there, even with the new K-8, the one we're talking about now, between the two schools, we won't be able to handle it. So we are going to be looking for and coming to you with hopefully another property in that area, talking to a few developers here in the next couple of months about what that might look like in their development. But we probably going to need another piece of property in that area.
The high school, we've talked about that. I'm sorry, I skipped ahead. The new K-8 at Wellin Park, we had initially thought we would need that one first. That's why it's ahead of it on the list here, but we really need the high school more. This one is basically going to be the same K-8 as the one at Clark and Lorraine. just further out in the process. We moved it back a year. The new high school at Wellin Park is a 425,000 square foot facility. We're looking to do a prototype. Several architects have what they call kit aparts. So the auditorium building is the same, the classroom wings are the same, the cafeteria is the same, but where they're located and configured on the site is different. So you still get the prototype cost, design cost, but you get it a little more customized for your county and your site. We're looking at how the K-8 and high schools will fit best on our site right now for those. I'm not sure what else about the new schools.
No, and one of the things we'll probably do that's different than we've done in the past is when we contract for civil and stuff like that up front, we'll be looking at both campuses at once because we're trying to get some efficiencies between the two campuses with parking lots and bus loops and all of that stuff. So that'll be a little bit different and exciting. We haven't done that in the past, so.
The next one is Northport. This is probably the one where we had the most, I would say, scope increase because of the Jacobs study. Originally, when numbers were put to this project, I think it was, we know we're going to have to do some HVAC renovations, but really they're going to need a lot of portables. They need their science wings updated. Their windows are delaminating and need to be replaced. Windows are hugely expensive to replace to meet the new code. This one has partial FF&E because some of the areas do have the original furniture. Some of the labs have been upgraded, so only partial FF&E is required. Their cafeteria for their current population is too small. So it was a lot of things at this campus where if we're there doing a $27 million renovation, we really need to be thinking about when's the next time we are going to be back at this campus and what are we going to be doing there, and does it make sense to include some of those things in the scope of work. Because of that, we pushed this one out to 24-25 so that we'd have some staggering of big renovation projects. What else, Jody?
No, I think that's you covered it. And I think one of the things that surprised us here is all the windows delaminating. We were not aware that was not priced, and that this is a hurricane shelter, and so certainly we want to make sure we've got the best windows in the facility. So that was a big one, and there are some roof issues there too. So there's a big increase in scope, and frankly, we had to make a decision in the capital budget between the conditions at Northport High and the other big HVAC renovation here that's coming up, Jane's going to talk about, is the conditions at Sarasota High, 13 and 14, East Campus. Equipment-wise, 13 and 14 has to go first. And so funding-wise, we had to make a decision, and that slid Northport High a little bit farther off in terms of schedule because we were planning on going there pretty quick, but we just can't handle them all at one time. So we had to make a decision again between those two campuses, and Sarasota High is the more critical one at this point.
Plus, that's a huge campus. I mean, it's really a huge campus. The next one we looked at was Oak Park. So this is one where we're trying out renovating one wing per year until all the buildings are replaced. This will give us really good historical data because the scopes of work will be basically the same. We can look at the cost per square foot year over year to see if it was more beneficial to have contracted it all to begin with. Part of the reason we did this at this campus is these students really can't be interrupted and moved easily, so we're doing all the work over the summer. So it's an intense design planning phase and then a short execution of the construction.
Yeah, we had an awesome opportunity to tour Oak Park the other day as a team with Jamie Lowitz, the principal, and kind of get a view of what was done in the wing with the last renovation. It really looks awesome. If you haven't been there in a while, I was super proud of it. And so once we walk through campus, it's really going to be awesome for the students out there. But the other conversation we had, which I know is of concern to you guys, is the Special Olympics track that we got in the 5-year plan. And so met with Jamie, talked about that, what that might look like, and she is reaching out to her contacts with Special Olympics to have a conversation about making sure that track scope is what they would need to come and have Special Olympics on our campus. So that is those conversations are happening too.
They currently hold it at Pineview, don't they, the Special Olympics?
I don't know for sure. Shirley, I apologize.
The next one, as Jody talked about, is Sarasota High. This is the phased renovation of buildings 13 and 14. including replacing underground chilled water lines, new partial FF&E. The portables, we started adding portables there for capacity needs this year. We put infrastructure in to add additional portables there, and then restore the site when we're all complete with that phased renovation. HVAC, just in case y'all aren't, when I say HVAC renovation, I mean we're gonna take out airside ductwork, equipment above the ceiling, we're gonna take out ceilings. When we do that, we're gonna replace the ceilings, we're gonna replace the lighting with LED lighting, upgrades, controls, fire alarm, IT, and then finishes inside, we're going to be painting and doing new flooring. We're working with the schools if they need new casework. In some cases they do, in some cases they don't. And doors and hardware. So HVAC renovation really is a lot more than just new air conditioner unit.
Yeah, well, this one, was the highest percentage over the original. This was double, a little more than double. The other ones were 25%.
Yeah,
It was just because you expanded the scope?
I can't attest to that budget. It may have just been a placeholder budget because I couldn't find where those numbers
I think
came from.
the other thing in scope too is you're going to get the piping too, right? So all the underground piping wasn't in the original scope, so she's going to get the piping at the same time, which is the best decision. And in the past, we've tested pipe and left it because it's disruptive, and can we get away with it? But I think Jane's making the right choice. Go get it at the same time. So let's increase the scope too.
Okay.
So that takes us kind of transitioned over into basically the layout of the 5-year plan, the rough draft of the 5-year plan, which talks about or kind of lays out all the projects we just discussed in the years we discussed them and the revenue associated, the borrowing associated with some of that. So are there any questions on the draft 5-year plan you see in front of you? Again, this is not something you're adopting today or next week. It's something for us to continue to work on throughout the year. We'll come back several times. If we need to come back on different projects, we will. But we'll bring this back before you as the 5-year plan as another draft, probably February, March or so, to relook at it again and confirm. And you'll adopt this as you normally do over the summer as the official 5-year plan moving forward. So with that, I know there are a lot of changes, a lot of tweaking, but I think it reflects current market conditions as best as the team can capture, and the budget addresses the growth that's right in front of us that we need to address. So with that.
In the total COPS, the certificate of participation bonds we're going to be getting, it's 300 and some, or what, do you have the total?
Sheena's our revenue side of the house that works, so it's on the capital budget. So come on up, Sheena. And the other thing that Sheena was able to provide is the debt profile for you, which I failed to mention, so you could see what your capacity is throughout the years. So Sheena?
The debt we staggered between 3 years because we have to be careful about timing of borrowing because of arbitrage issues that come up at the end. But the total debt is somewhere, I'm trying to add in my head, somewhere around $350 million total, with a little over 245 million being borrowed in 22-23, which will be next year. And that'll include Goshio, the K-8, and the high school. And then 82 million being borrowed in 23-24. And that is for another K-8. And 40 million being borrowed in 24-25, and that will be for Garden.
All right, so that looks like it's 367, 790.
Okay.
All right, thank you. And that's the only borrowing we're planning.
Until farther out, like at least for like 8 to 10 years.
And the interest rates are still low, are they not? Or
I calculate they are right now. I've heard a lot of economists talking about interest rates are going to, because of inflation, going to be rising. But we always calculate debt service at 5% for 15 years on all our borrowings. So hopefully that will cover us. And debt service is in this budget as well. I've already calculated out payments and all
Thank you.
that. You're welcome.
So thank you, Sheena. I apologize. I forgot to introduce Sheena. She's our revenue side of the house, side of the team, and she works with us on does an awesome job and works with us on a constant basis. I'm going to come to a close here and just open it up for questions. The one thing I will note that we didn't bring in front of you today, but you're going to see in the next, probably in the next workshop, we'll talk to Dr. Assman about that, and that is the work plan, the project plan for the penny sales tax. You saw a draft of that several months ago. We now have had the community meetings that we needed to have, and so we've got a draft plan for you to take a look at in a workshop if there are any questions, and for you to formally adopt, so we can give that to the county as our official work plan moving forward for penny sales tax. So we'll bring that back to you at the next workshop and get it on your agenda for approval if you're okay with that. I just wanted to mention that's coming too. So with that. Thank you very much, and if you have any additional questions, we're happy to answer.
Seeing none, we're going to dismiss you with 10 minutes to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody, and thank you to your team. They did a fantastic job. All right, the next item is Dr. Moore, who will be talking to us about our state equity review. No.
Can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So last June, I shared with you all the state equity update that we're required to do, the educational update for the district. And I sent you a gazillion documents and artifacts that you had to kind of sift through, which we have to do every year. And once that gets done and it goes back to the state, they then send us something called the monitoring work plan, which you should have a copy of. And that provides us with any required actions that we need to do based on the data we submitted, or if things are fine. So what I'd like to do is just kind of walk through my summary of that document. You can either follow within the document or with that summary. And then there's a couple of things I'll throw up on the screen, and I think you may have that PowerPoint. And I know we kind of changed a couple of things, so I'm not sure if you have what the changes or not. But be that as it may, just some tables that I think would be better that we can see, kind of look at more clearly, and that the public can see more clearly about that data, and as we move through this document. So I will begin, and I'd like to start by just kind of sharing why we're doing this. So in compliance with the Florida Department of Education, Florida Education Equity Act, each school district is required to submit an annual update respective of the Florida DOE's mission and goals of equity, access, and closing the achievement gaps among minority and non-minority groups in accordance with federal and state statutes and regulations. The responsibilities of the Office of Equal Educational Opportunity includes compliance oversight of the Florida Educational Equity Act, Section 1000.05, Florida statutes, and other federal and state legislation relating to equity in education. The Florida Educational Equity Act and other federal and state legislation such as Title IX, Title VI, Title II ADA, and Section 504 prohibit discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, sex, disability, age, or marital status against students and employees. The Florida Education Equity Act and the State Board of Education Rule 6A 19.00119.010 require that the Office of Equal Educational Opportunity requires them to monitor public school districts' compliance with statute. And then the annual educational equity update is the reporting tool that enables that office to monitor and ensure adherence to provisions of the laws and that educational resources are equitably distributed. So that's what this is, why we do it, and it's something that we have to do based on the law. The report itself is broken up into 7 sections, which is what I'll kind of move through pretty rapidly. Part 1 is procedural requirements. Part 2 is incomplete items or pending actions. Part 3 is student participation, and those are the items that I'll put up on the screen. Gender and equity in athletics is Part 4. Part 5 is employment equity. Part 6, single-sex schools and classes. And then Part 7 is pregnant and parenting students. So with respect to Part 1, I'm not going to, I'll try not to read all of that unless you want me to, if you haven't had a chance to go through it. But really to ensure educational opportunities are included in the federal and state civil rights rules, regulations, and guidelines. These requirements include the annual and continuance notices of non-discrimination and the designation of persons to coordinate compliance with the federal and state regulations prohibiting discrimination and notification of the identity of and contact information for the persons and adoption and availability of grievance or complaint procedures for use by students, employees, and applicants for admission and employment. So that's basically what we do through our HR department and making sure that we have that information available for students, staff, families, and the community in terms of what they need to do should any issue of discrimination come up. So, and with respect to that, we are in compliance, so it's just continuing what we normally do, and we're in good standing with that. In terms of non-discrimination for vocational educational programs in Section B1, the district needs to provide evidence of the annual notification on non-discrimination published prior to the beginning of the school year to students, parents, employees, and the general public. In addition, the district should provide evidence within the 21-22, which is the one we're doing this year, equity update that the annual notice of non-discrimination was published in a medium such as the local newspaper, radio, TV, prior to the beginning of the school year. This all should be disseminated annually to students, parents, employees, and the general public prior to the beginning of the school year as required by the vocational guidelines. And also, an annual notice needs to be in the languages that are reflected in the community of minority persons with English language skills. Having some discussions with some of the schools and environments that are involved in this, I know that there's a course catalog in our webpage where this information is housed. In addition, during the marketing campaigns, they do put that information out for the public and with flyers and other documents. What is beginning this year, based on what we learned, is that they're going to have 2 ads per year, full ads in the fall and in the winter with this information in that public medium, which is what the state is saying that we need to do in one of those public mediums. So we're going to be addressing that this year. In Section B2, continuous notification of non-discrimination, the action required is that the district should provide a link to the continuous notification of non-discrimination on the district's homepage for ease of accessibility. The district should continue to ensure that the continuous notice of non-discrimination is published and distributed regularly to students, parents, employees, and the general public as outlined in Title IX. And I believe that is on our HR page, but perhaps we need to think about putting it on the main homepage.
Yeah, I would like to make sure, and Craig should probably, that, when we have, on our homepage, we have a Find It Fast, that somebody could type in the non-discrimination report, or, even the entire equity report. I don't know if we already do. Yep, I'm hearing a yes. And people often send us, they ask for information.
Right.
And a lot of the information is there on the website. And if you just pull down the Find It Fast and type in what you're looking for, you should probably be able to find it.
Yes.
And if you can't find it there, then reach out to us. But do that first. But the Find It Fast is a very good tool on our website to find, the documents that we're looking at today, or any other information that we put out there for the public.
Yeah, it's really good. They've done an amazing job cleaning that up and making finding information easily accessible. In Section 1C, notice for availability of reasonable accommodations to applicants for employment, and that is our Human Resources website. It includes those reasonable accommodations, so we're in really good shape there. So all of those, we are in compliance. So there's no action required. And Part 2, incomplete items or pending actions. Those are the items that we received last year when I took this on. We did respond and met all of those required actions, and so we're clean. So we don't have any other leftover items from pending from last year. So anything that's up now will be on this coming years. So we're in good shape on that. So we're good. Part 3, student participation. So this I'm going to kind of move over to, and this is talking about the enrollment gap in our level 3 and advanced placement courses. So in this area, districts should submit enrollment data and methods and strategies for increasing minority enrollment in advanced placement, international baccalaureate, and advanced international certification education, which is our AP, IB, and ACE, as well as our dual enrollment courses, and they have looked at this data from 2015-16 to 2021, the state. And so what they expect from us are the methods and strategies that we use to ensure that we are effectively increasing enrollment for minority and minority male students in our level 3 and advanced courses. So this comes under evaluation methods and strategies under Rule 6A 19.010. 1C, FAC, and it requires institutions to develop and implement methods and strategies to increase participation in designated programs and courses for students from underrepresented groups. And this data is collected by the state from our district and all districts, and then they provide us with feedback on that information. So when we look at, and I gave you some tables in the back so you can follow there. Sorry, this is so small for the folks out there. But when you look at the tables and our overall enrollment, and the first one is looking specifically at grades 9, 12 advanced placement, AP, IB, and ACE. There was an overall enrollment increase from 32 to 40%. When you're looking at the comparison group, and the way this is broken out is by the change in the enrollment gap. So the number you see, for example, like Black, where you see 17% and 16, 17, the gap is between the 17% and the 35% above it, and that's how that is arranged throughout this document. So you will see that there was an increase in all areas, in all different groups, and there was a decrease in the gap percentage for our Black students from 18 to 15 percentage points, and also in our Hispanic students from 11 to 9 percentage points. When you go down a little bit further and look specifically at the male population, you will see that there was an increase overall. And then with our Black males, there was an increase from 11 to 17 percentage points. So what this is even though everyone increased, there was an increase in all the groups, there was still a decrease in the actual gap. So although we did see some growth in terms of the enrollment, that gap still persists, and that gap actually is a little bit wider than we want it to be. And that's what the state is talking to us about, that we have to address those things. And with our Hispanic males, there was an increased percentage from 7 to 10 percentage points. So we just have to really kind of look at those groups and ensure that we are providing those supports and looking at what we're doing. And I will share some of the strategies that some of the schools are doing in a moment. With our comparison group and our ELL students, there was a decrease from 29 to 24 percentage points. And then down below that, I share our goals, the district goals were to increase that enrollment for Black students by 7 percentage points, Hispanic students by 3 percentage points, and Black males by 7 percentage points. Hispanic males by 5 percentage points, and ELLs by 2 percentage points by the 2021 school year. If you look over at Table 2 in terms of dual enrollment, you'll see that there is a decrease in that. And that decrease was from 10 to 6%, and I'll talk to you a little bit about why that is. But I want to first look at those differences. You can see that every single group, with the exception of our ELL population at the bottom, showed a decrease in terms of enrollment in our dual enrollment programs. And part of that is because the dual enrollment program that we had was on the high school campuses. and SCF then moved them only to their campuses, so they can only access that by virtual or actually going to the campuses. And we have students who don't drive. And so there was an overall decrease in that. We then brought in USF to partner with us to, as another means of being able to access that so we can do it on the campus. The issue with that is there was a much more rigor involved in that. And this is the chart, and you have the chart with you that shows the differences in terms of the requirements that students need to have to enroll in that USF program, and also difficulty in getting staff that have the credentials to teach those courses. So it's been a little bit of a struggle, but I think the principals are looking at that and trying to work out some ways in which we can get those students involved and get staff. That we can ensure that we're teaching those classes and providing that dual enrollment opportunity on the campuses. I know the students love it. I know that it's very helpful when they're getting ready to go to college because it puts them at an advantage. So we are working on that.
And if I may, Dr. Moore,
Yes,
I think another reason too is if you noticed on the previous pages, you'll notice there's an increase in AP, IB, ACE. And so when that happens, sometimes there's a decrease in dual enrollment because they
Right.
make a choice.
Right.
And so that is part of it as well. So
Exactly.
it's a great thing that we're increasing in one area, but it sometimes affects the other area.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Asplin, for bringing that in. Table 3 is the overall inclusion in AP, IB, ACE, and DE and honors courses. And so when you look at that table, you'll see that there's an increase from 66 to 74% overall, which is great. However, when you look at the increases in the enrollment, even though there is a decrease in the enrollment gap, the gap, certainly still exists. So we want to work on trying to make sure that we can really truly narrow those gaps in those enrollment in all of those programs. So let me share a little bit with you. Some of the schools are already working on that since last year. There's a school that, for example, Booker High School, they have a principal brunch 2 times a year where they have students that have a 3.5 or higher GPA. They're invited, and this is to bring increased enrollment in their DE and ACE courses, and they call it Awareness and Opportunity and Exposure. So students that meet 50% of that criteria are allowed to take the PERT test, which is the Post-Educational Readiness Test. If they do that in the 9th grade, then they hold that for 2 years, so it's already there, and those students can just move on into dual enrollment. For their freshman students at that school, they have for grade 9s, they place them in pre-ACE courses, and I found that in several of our schools, our high schools, they're doing that with those freshmen that are coming in, so they're getting them exposed to that very early. Some schools have ambassadors who become peer mentors to work with those students to get them more interested in those advanced courses. Also, our college and career, for example, Sarasota High School has a college and career one-to-one to ensure that every student has a plan as well as one-to-one coaching. Every freshman that is not in ACE at Sarasota High are being placed into pre-ACE environmental science and environmental management. They also, for students that are engaged in a lot of sports and after-school activities that don't necessarily have as much time to be engaged in those kinds of classes, they have mentors and tutors that they put in place to work with those students, so they help to keep them on track and following their plan as well. Over at Riverview, they've changed the magnet application from paper to online, which has increased the diversity of the applicants at that school. And they also accept IB applicants in their rising 9th, 10th, and 11th grade applications. And I know that they're pushing a lot more kids into pre-IB as well over there. And at Venice High School, they're placing all of their level 2 and above in IB Language Lit moving forward this year. They're also enrolling students in pre-IB English 1 and 2 to help prepare them for the IB courses. So the schools are already beginning. I intend to set up meetings with them to go out and just really sit down and talk with them so that we can really put some measurable objectives in place. So not that we're just getting kids in, but what's the outcome of that? So we're going to be working together to put that data together as well. Any questions on?
I just want to point out on your graph 3, when you look at the groups up at the top, it's got white 70% in 2016, and then it goes to 78% plus 8. But down the bottom, down by ELL, it's 70% to 76% plus 8. So I think that
Yeah, that's a
76
typo.
should be 78.
That is correct. That's
If we're going to send that to the state, we want to make sure we got it right.
Oh, this is last year's data. This year, the
Okay.
next year's will be,
All right.
it will be accurate. Thank you
Okay.
so much. Thank you for pointing that out.
Question, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Karen?
Dr. Moore, just validating that we're not actually lowering criteria in any of the programs. We're just giving them opportunities for pre-IB, pre-ACE, more exposure before they actually have to meet current criteria.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I really like what the schools are doing is they're providing that support to shore those students up so that they're not just placed in those classes, that they have the supports they need, the mentorship they need, and everything to be successful. So they're not just saying we're just putting them in there to have them in there to get the numbers, but they are actually, they're required to do the same things that everybody else is doing. So they're not changing any standards.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
In the dual enrollment versus the IB-ACE programs, where we have the change of increase and decrease, something doesn't feel right if we're allowing some to say it's okay that something decreased because something increased. Which one is better?
Yeah, we're not saying it's okay. The state's not saying it's okay either, and I'll get to that in a second. They are really wanting to make sure that we are addressing that issue, and that even though we are showing an increase, that based on our metrics and how we're deriving that, and I'll share that with you now, the state has indicated that although we've shown some increases in minority enrollment for advanced courses, the enrollment gap persists. So it doesn't matter that it's going up here and not here. That's an issue. And so our accountability measures, and that's what I'm going to be working with the schools on, don't appear to be targeted to reduce the gap. And so we have to be intentional in this process and making sure that that we're not just, like I said, just doing it to get the numbers, that we want to make sure that we're looking at who's on the campuses, who the students are, what the population is, and looking at that very strategically and putting those kids in those appropriate advanced courses. So that students that are more interested in DE, they're in DE. Students that are more interested in the advanced courses, they're in there, and then we're not leaving anybody behind. But we're meeting the needs of all of those students and providing the supports for them to be successful.
Yeah, I think too, it depends upon the student and which one is better, because to put a student who's average into, you know, a more rigorous course may not necessarily help them. It may frustrate them, you know, so put them in where they work. And if they're looking to get not into an Ivy League college or even to a 4-year college, if they're just looking to get into a 2-year, to get an AA degree, to move on to what they're looking to do, the dual enrollment might be better for them.
Right.
I mean,
And I
so
think
it depends upon what their plans are after. Now, don't they have a plan they start with, and then every year they look at it again?
Yes. And I think that's important. That's a great point. You know, some students that they may not be wanting to go full-time into college. They may want to go in the military. And getting those dual enrollment classes and those really help them when they enter into the military. It takes them in at a different level. So there's all kinds of really positive things. Dr. Aspin, did you?
Yes, if I can respond to that as well. You know, there are a couple of things there with dual enrollment. One is sometimes when you're talking to students and you're talking to parents and they know that, you know, going into a dual enrollment class, you know, and receiving college credit, you definitely want to try to make an A in that class to start your college out with a great grade point average. And if you step out of there with a C, you're already at a 2.0, and then all of a sudden you're not eligible for certain grants and scholarships and so forth, because you have to have that 3.0 at least. And so I know that comes into play, and that's just talking through that with families and students and trying to help them with that. Another is could be transportation. I know we've run into that a few times where a student needs to go to another campus for the dual enrollment. It's a transportation problem, and we're having to, work through that and fix that problem. But I think the third one that you mentioned earlier is very important as well, Dr. Moore, and that is finding teachers to teach that. They have to have at least 18 hours in a master's level area of their area. And they're usually someone who actually works on the college campus or someone who works for us that has that as 18 hours. And the best situation that I've seen is when we have our own teachers teach it who have the 18 hours and are on campus, so our students don't have to travel anywhere, and they're working with one of our teachers who they know very, very well, instead of a college professor. Not that there's anything wrong with the college professor, because it's a great experience. But those are three areas right there that when you sit down with a student and a family, they will ask those questions, and we have to try to mitigate that. So that sometimes causes people to say, oh, well, you know what, I think I'm going to go into AP, IB, or ACE. It's on my campus. I'm not going to have to go through those particular items that I just discussed, and so then it makes it a little bit easier, even though they could get credit at the end of the day, taking the test, for instance, in an AP class and get credit out of school. They don't necessarily take that grade with them when they go to the college. It becomes credit only versus dual enrollment. You're taking the grade, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
I guess where I'm coming from, and you did touch on that before I got to ask my question, is that you were looking at the data of outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really where I was headed to say, what are the outcomes of those two programs and which one has benefits? And I hear what you're saying, but I also know dual enrollment students that know that they have a significant road ahead of them, are often looking for dual enrollment as a head start to get on that track, because they know they have 4 or 8 years in front of them post high school. So that's why I'm asking, and if we struggle already for finding the appropriate instructional staff, and if we have that issue, then I need to know that we're attending to that in the best possible way.
Yes, and I believe that we are.
And also one other item, just to throw it out there, there's something called Collegiate High School. You probably heard of that.
Mm-hmm.
And the Collegiate High School can be on your own campus. And it's for those students who really know that they want to have their AA degree when they graduate from high school. So they would get their diploma and their AA degree at the same time. And so that's something else that we need to look deeply into and make sure that the students who want to be in that program are in there or have the information that they need to move in there. And that will also, I think, help with numbers with dual enrollment.
For purposes, we're at our more relaxed atmosphere now that we're at the workshops, and I don't have my little thing that I look at most of the time to find out who wants to talk. So what we do now is when someone sounds like they're wrapping up, we either raise our finger, or if for whatever reason I'm looking off in the distance, say, Madam Chair, and I'll, so we've got Bridget and then Jane, so go ahead.
Thank you.
And then Karen, too.
Well, and I know, again, for purposes of time, I think dual enrollment would be something I would really be encouraged to have a specific workshop on that. It's something, just so we don't run out of this particular topic, but I know it's something that this district in the past, and you mentioned on a couple things with the UCF not having that access, but when you highlighted that, because I know that was a painful component to a lot of people in this community, and you highlighted the threshold for USF compared to SCF, is that what? Yeah, and the transportation, which is always an issue, and so I think it's wonderful that I'm so excited we have AB, ACE, IB, we have all these amazing different options, but I do think there's a lot of families, and when we go through that really dual enrollment was a wonderful opportunity for them for whatever their trajectory is. And so if there is another opportunity for us to expand upon that, so it's not, and I'm very grateful that we have USF as a partner, but I would like to see what other options are, because I do believe there are still many families who are seeking that option and having access to it. And I think it's a great opportunity. So but that may be more of a deep dive. And so if we could have that in a future workshop, I would really appreciate that.
And we got an extra 10 minutes from our other people wrapping up early, so we do have time to go into this and discuss it. For people watching at home, dual enrollment is students who are attending and taking college courses and getting college credit while they're in school, and they don't have to pay for it we get it. The AB, IB, and ACE programs are all accelerated programs in high school. Jane?
Thank you. I was just going to say that I also have some interest. I don't know that we're talking about this, but I do have an interest in minorities enrollment at Pineview. And this is something that we have discussed for a long time around, but I think that that would be a great workshop item in the future as well, because we're not doing a very good job with that. And it is something that, bothers me. I know that it bothers Dr. Covert at Pineview. He's always looking for ways of attracting students. It's probably not in the most convenient place, and we have some issues with high school transportation, but not necessarily elementary and middle school. And for those who do not know, Pineview goes between grades 2 and 12 and is a magnet gifted school, and it's a wonderful, wonderful campus. And so I think that is something else that we need to look at as well, Dr. Moore.
Yes, I know. I've gone down and spoken with Dr.
You've gone
Cooper.
through this, I know, over the years, but I think that we need to address or to look at ways of promoting Pineview with some of our parents, because it's just, it isn't happening.
And also look at some of the gifted clusters we have also, because we've got them for elementary and middle. It isn't as important in high school because of these dual enrollment and AB and IB, but look at that also. Karen?
Thank you. You talked about one high school, Dr. Moore, having student plans for their four-year high school career. How hardwired are we in middle schoolers having plans, as well as all high schools, and getting an understanding in middle school what your GPA means, what access to classes, those prep courses. I love that idea for dual enrollment, IB, ACE, advanced placement, and students understanding the actual criteria. I think that is monumental versus you enter ninth grade and all this is in your face and you didn't have time to have a vision and of course have your plans, each individual student plan being alive and able to be modified as we modify options. And when Mrs. Goodwin talks about gifted coursework and how much thought have we given to elementary schools, middle schools, in targeting prep courses for students or families that want a vision of gifted programming. I really like that idea a lot versus what other states have done and basically lower criteria for advanced placement IBA's programs. I think the prep courses are genius, and I commend you for that.
Yeah, I think that, and even getting the college and career into the middle schools has been a great move, and just really exposing those students to the opportunities that exist beyond high school. And as they're preparing to go to high school, it has been a great move by our district, so thank you for that.
I've been reading some of the things I get from, I don't know, Ed Nation, NEA and all, and I was actually reading where some states or some districts were actually getting rid of their gifted programs because they're saying, well, there are no gifted. It was one of those left-leaning states that was deciding they didn't need gifted anymore. And I really hope we don't go there because we do. And I understand that, a gifted student would get bored very fast in a regular school. And so when we have problem students, it's sometimes the low-performing and the high-performing that we've got to address where they're at.
Those needs. There's a word for that.
Dr. Asplin?
One thing that, just so you know, along what you were saying, Ms. Rose, in the past, we have tested second graders in Title I only for gifted. And this year, we tested every second grader for gifted across our entire district. So we have an idea who they are and the students that might be going into that direction. So,
May I ask Dr. Asplin about the high school and middle school plans for their vision of where they're going and their knowledge of these preparatory courses and criteria and the various advanced programs. Are we hardwired in our middle schools and high schools that they are making plans with an understanding of what their options are in the future, or are we looking towards it?
Yes, so with our counselors, I know that they're helping us with that. And as you know, in high school, January, February is when we actually schedule students for the next school year. And so I know our counselors are looking at that pretty heavily, especially at PSAT scores, for instance, because the PSAT information will come back and let us know which students might be students who need to go into those higher level classes. And then also they're looking at their test scores, their past test scores, because what we find is that you'll have a student who maybe has a higher test score, a 3, 4, 5 on the FSA, for instance, and they have never even taken an advanced class. And when you sit down with them, a lot of times they'll say, well, never thought about it. Family never thought about it. Nobody's pushing them to move forward. And so having those conversations based on the data that they have and or PSAT or other testing like that, we're trying to meet with those students as early as possible and those families as early as possible to move them in. Now, when you look at those students who are in advanced classes in high school, it usually happened around 6th grade. If you're moving into advanced classes in 6th grade, 7th grade while you're in middle school, chances are you're going to continue on through high school. If you haven't by the time you're leaving middle school, chances are you're not, unless you have something that no one looked at, like those test scores and that inspiration to move forward. So it's a matter of talking to families, talking to students, and then looking at the scores, but then also trying to catch them early in middle school so that they're on some sort of path or trajectory that would allow them to be where they need to be.
Dr. Aspen, I know that at Pineview, I know that I'm almost pretty sure that all the students at Pineview, I think when they get to the high school age, take the PSAT. How many students at our other schools? Do we do that across the board, that our other schools encourage them all to take PSATs?
Yes. Steve, do you know how many or how we do that?
All of our 11th graders take it. The state pays for it, all 11th graders.
All 11th graders take it and the state pays for it. 10th graders at Pineview. And they pay for it.
So all 11th graders take the PSAT.
And there's an option moving forward for the ACT or the SAT.
SAT. Mm-hmm.
And back to, yes. And something back to what you said, Ms. Rose, about how do we get to them younger? And you just heard 11th grade PSAT. It'd be nice to be able to have more students take it in the 10th grade. That would help us.
Steve Canty.
But are we going to pay for that, or are they going to pay? And you get into that. But
Steve Canty is our executive director.
Yeah, a couple things I want to
Secondary.
mention. Ms. Rose mentioned something, and I think it's a great point. And to get to the 4-year plan and having the conversation around 4-year plans, we started those with the career advisors a few years ago. I think we've started them before that, but ultimately, I think we got a better traction with the career advisors in middle school a few years back. Part of the strategic plan, strategy 1 or goal 1, strategy 5, is to. Okay, thanks, Chris. So anyway, so we are. I think you're going to see a renewed emphasis on that, because I think that's definitely something that we want to focus on with our students, is making sure that, and it's not just around accelerated coursework, it's also around career, whatever the careers are. So I think you're going to see over the course of the next several months, once we finish the strategic plan, you're going to see a better structure around that 4-year plan. I think it'll be more meaningful for students. So that's one thing. The other thing I wanted to mention, scheduling practices at the secondary level in both middle and high school, as again Ms. Rose is aware of. We've accelerated a lot of students in middle school, but we've also accelerated more students. If you look at the percentages, those percentages are pretty good. We want to continue to close that gap, and as percentages increases, sometimes that gap increases. So we have to get a renewed emphasis on supporting those students. But in secondary level, we schedule every student individually. We look at their data, and it's a big undertaking. But beginning in January, We'll start meeting with each and every student individually, and we'll have a conversation with each one of them, looking at their data. And part of that is to encourage them to take the most rigorous coursework that's available to them, but also to look at other options that are available. And I think that's something we added 4 or 5 years ago, and we've had a lot of success, and I think the data would suggest that. The other thing I do want to mention, we have IB for all at Riverview. I think that's a really good model that we want to look at across the district, as they are now, that group of students, they're juniors this year. Next year, they'll be seniors, and they'll be testing through the IB program. Those numbers are going to go through the roof, the number of students who have access to IB at Riverview. Once they finish that cycle, we'll take a look at the data. I could see us definitely encouraging more and more students, but part of that is preparation prior to entering those classes. If you're a level 2 student, there's more data than just the FSA to look at. As we said, we look at the PSAT, we look at AP, it's escaping me, but it's a predictor of success in AP courses. We use that data also, and that comes from the PSAT. So the last thing I would say is we are having conversations always about starting in elementary and identifying students when you're looking at students that hopefully would move towards a more accelerated pathway. Whether those students are regular ed, ESE, it doesn't matter. I mean, we want to look at every student and see what their potential is and moving forward. So we're having conversations right now around starting in elementary. I know Brandon and I have a meeting scheduled to talk about that very thing. So I think we're moving in the right direction. Still a lot of work to be done, and it changes all the time. But I think we're moving right.
Before you leave,
Okay.
there's one thing I've been harping on for the last several years,
One
and that
thing?
is
Just one thing? I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
I haven't been nasty about this one, but it is something that even back when I was in the legislature bothered me. Florida has the highest graduation requirements of any state at 24 credits. I think it was Florida and Alabama were racing to the bottom at the time. Well, we have now, I think, maybe 12 other states. I think it's about 12 states now. I had it written down somewhere. I don't know where it is today, but it's something that I look at is the number of states at 24 credits. And it's still a minority. I mean, I believe it's something in the double digits, but not over 20. And then there's a lot more at 22 and 20, and some are even, I think it's California, down to just that core 14, and any of the what do they call the extras that you can join? Electives. Any of those electives that they don't count that you have to have them. And I know that another of the gap that we aren't looking at right here is that graduation gap. And I know there's some opportunities that they don't need that 26, but I'm just, why are we higher?
So
than the
Sarasota
state?
County's we've had always placed great value in arts courses and CTE courses and other opportunities for students, to prepare them for their future. A 26 credit option provides those extra opportunities in the arts as well as in career technical education. The reality is this: as students progress through, we have a number of students that graduate with 18 credits. The state has an 18 credit graduation option. We have a number of students that graduate with 24. We have a number of students that graduate with 26. But ultimately, we hold on to that 26 credits because, we put a lot of resources into our arts programs and our CTE programs, and we put a lot of emphasis on those for our students. So
Well,
that's why
I would hate to have somebody not graduate because, they were having to take the reading courses and didn't get an arts course or failed the arts course for one reason or another. But
doesn't-
if they get the 18 credits, can they still walk with their
Absolutely.
class?
100%.
All right, so
State has
perhaps,
State has an 18 credit option. We have to, we are mandated to utilize the 18 credit and the 24 credit option and 26, so.
perhaps at a future workshop, we might want to look at graduation rates, graduation requirements, and how they can have those options. I've got Tom, Karen, and Bridget.
So I know that Dr. Asplin and I have talked about this, but the career success, by the way, Dr. Moore, thank you so much for you sparked a really healthy conversation that we're enjoying here. The career success centers that we have, and I know you mentioned Sarasota High School. I certainly love what they do in Northport as well. But we have capacity issues that, you know, a lot of our counselors try and get that one-on-one. Those success centers seem to have the ability to accommodate a lot of students in those processes. And a bulk of our conversations, as we were today, are still focused on those college-bound students, those ACE IB folks. We still have students that are not going to go to college, and they're not getting the support or the suggestions. And so the career success centers, I think, are a nucleus of how to enhance what kids are going to do. And Karen, I'm with you on how do we get that concept into middle school sooner so that kids are starting to get the right kind of questions asked of them, the right kind of support. And just as important as going to middle school to me is that 40% of kids don't complete their plan after graduation of high school. And so I'd like to see those career success centers offer it to alumni for 2 to 4 years after they graduate high school. Life happens. Things mess up. Their financial aid's a problem. So to me, the conversation is just not only about graduation rates. It's about outcome. It's about where they're going after they graduate, and do they know how to get through the process. So I think that's a good jumping off point for all of us. I'm glad to see we're all kind of talking on the same page.
And that's also part of strategic.
Yeah, it sounds like we've got another workshop in the making.
It sure does.
Karen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And wholeheartedly, Mr. Edwards and Mr. Cantis, I think the answer from my perspective is having middle schoolers have a 4-year plan for high school so that parents and students can understand what all those options are, from advanced programming to careers, and that it doesn't have to be singular. You can actually do both and establish a career to pay for the college, so that I think it's when it's in your face that it is an issue. And just one last piece with the International Baccalaureate and my experience with it, and I understand that every student at Riverview is in pre-IB, and I think that is excellent. It's that preparatory course so that you see it as an option, but I caution us to monitor that closely, in that the workload for teachers and the workload for students is significant, and following that versus watering down IB, that preparatory course actually prepares them, and we have the commitment from staff.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great point. Thank you.
Bridget?
Thank you. No, well, I'm just going to quickly say on the Career Success Centers, I agree, and I think it's just, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of students who eventually will go to secondary, post-secondary, but may not, and there's an opportunity from both an economic standpoint. I know Tripp Jennings has brought up a lot of different things and has some good ideas in that aspect, because I think the utilization opportunity is still there. And so I'm very encouraged to see us work towards that and then trickle it down to the middle school level. The one question I had was on the gifted screening. Do we screen or we test? Because there's two different things. When we talked about second graders.
Test, it's called, or screen, we screen.
So we're not doing real.
No, we're doing. I hear somebody on screen. We're doing the real
You're
test.
not microphone on, are you?
All second graders are.
So what was your question again, Ms.?
So when you said we do universal
Right.
testing for all second graders, because I know
Yes.
it's been talked about for a while, to largely in part of making families aware, to also seek other opportunities to expand opportunities at Pineview. But my understanding is it's a screening. It's like a high level screening. It's not a real gifted test.
It's not screening, it's a test. Sonia, can you come talk to me about that?
Different things behind me, so there's not clarity.
Thanks, Deb.
Perhaps tell us the difference between a screen and a test.
Cute shoes.
Oh, thanks. Hey, good morning. Yes, it is going to be a screener. The Naglieri is a screener, and based on the screening results, there's a score, and if a student meets that cut score, they'll be referred for a formal evaluation. And the formal evaluation is the one that requires the parental consent, and formalized testing.
So in my experience, the screening is it a higher bar than, because I have, and I know that there's, and this is maybe perception, not reality, which is happens, but when it's screened, sometimes I have been told that it doesn't always catch everyone that would be necessarily seen as gifted, that when they would do the full test or evaluation would actually be at the gifted level. Is that not accurate, or?
I don't know if I can like say yes or no that there's a higher bar for a screener versus an assessment. It's one piece of data, and like you said, it's not going to catch everybody. There's other factors that teams take into consideration. They look at iReady scores, they look at classroom performance, but it's a tool we put in place to try to catch some of the students that we might not otherwise identify.
And so I guess when we talk about, thank you very much.
You're
When we
welcome.
talk about expanding access, if that's where we go, maybe is that something we need to look at, or is that the best practice? Are we catching everyone? Because I'm curious, when this initiative started, how has it really has it changed anything? I mean, have we seen a larger universe of access or participants? So.
I know that some of the teachers see it also, and, my daughter being in kindergarten would identify some, but, I think even when she was up at Emma, that there were parents that were not interested in that that bus ride all the way down to, so it's not just saying they're gifted and we're keeping them out. Some of them chose not to.
Well, and I would always say,
And it's not just the
parents
test,
being part of
parents
that
see it.
decision, whether or not you're doing it, of course,
Right.
I feel like that's just have a stamp.
And
in it.
we
I
have
don't know how to
gifted,
stand with that,
gifted
but-
programs all over the district.
In every single school, but, see, son. Okay, good morning. When we started
Check, is the light on?
yeah. So we initiated to expand opportunities for all students. And yes, we have seen an increase of students being screened, and we have Plan A and Plan B based on state statute. But any parent still has the opportunity of request a screening, because in the state of Florida, you must meet an IQ in order to be qualified for gifted services. Going back to the expansion, the Naglieri was chosen as one of the assessments that can allow non-English speakers as well as families from socioeconomic diversity to have opportunities of expansion for accelerated curriculum. So it's a nonverbal. So it just allows us to allow the whole child to be taken into account and prevent from barriers interfering for their performance in education.
Okay, now we've spent a lot of time on this, and I think it's a good time we spent, but we went over by 20 minutes, and that's good, almost doubled. But we cut into the equity policy a little bit, and hopefully that some of those questions would have worked on both of these, because the equity policy is about educational equity.
Correct. So,
Dr. Moore, before you start, I just wanted to lay the groundwork on some of this. As you recall, I came on board August 10th, and I think it was August 11th is when we started having our professional development, our training, and we had to kind of stop that to back up and punt, so to speak, and just figure out what we were going to do. And part of what I decided to do was to create this equity committee that I know Dr. Moore is going to talk about. And the effort there was to find folks of all different cultures to be on this committee, and then have discussions and work through a policy that we needed to put together. And so that's what she did. And we brought Dr. Moore on board, as you know, as Director of Equity and Innovation. And as you just saw, that equity report that we have from the state that we work on all year long, she handles that, among other things. So I appreciate all the work she's done and what the committee has done. But that was the reason for everything that we did. And as we move forward, the committee created this plan. And I know that we've had a couple of workshops already where Dr. Moore has talked through the plan while it was being created. And I know the board has seen it a couple of times as well, and we've had discussions about it. So now we're at a point where I think we're completing the plan, and that's what she's going to share with you today. So if you would, Dr. Moore, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Asplin. If we could bring up the PowerPoint. First I want to say I'm really excited to share this with you. A lot of work went into this policy with a lot of folks in our community. I want to thank Dr. Asplin for all the incredible individuals that he selected to be on that and who agreed to be a part of that committee prior to my arrival. And they've diligently worked to ensure that this policy is inclusive, that it meets the requirements of the federal and state statutes and laws, that it meets the direction and desires of our strategic plan, and most important, the needs of those whom we serve, which are our children and families. So I want to thank some of the members of the Equity Committee, Drs. Anu Malik, Manab Malik, Ping Falhaber, Bill Woodson, Davion Spires, Dewana Washington, Linda Daniels, Queen Zabriskie, Thomas Williams, Trevor Harvey, Amanda Rico, Jerry Chafee, Linda Ramirez, Luz Cosera, Sid Quinn, Julie Wright-Halbert, Dr. Wendy Katz, Carol Miller, James Robinson, Mickey Stone, Nadia Sawa, Christian Yu, George Hernandez, Nora Mitchell, Emma Anderson, Soraya Davis, Ashley Cote, Bill Neese, James Miner, Rana Bazzini, Sarah Wertheimer, David Wilkins, and I'm hoping I didn't miss anybody, but really just an amazing group of folks, so diverse, and 5 of those that I called out were high school students. So very glad to have had, and they were very, very active in terms of their input. So I want to share a little bit about who we are and kind of where we're going with all of this, with the equity plan and policy. How it relates and how we got to this point, basically. So I want to talk a little bit about building a framework for equity, which is through belonging and dignity. And that is a framework that we adopted here in our district. We have been engaging in a great deal of professional learning and to ensure that we are focused on what needs to happen to be able to support our children. As Dr. Asplin mentioned, when he came on board, we were engaged in what we consider a dysfunctional cycle of equity. We were just kind of at a crossroads where we had a lot of misunderstandings. I think there were some differences in what people's assumptions were. And so rather than continue on that road, he, with a great deal of wisdom, put the brakes on and said, let's relook at this. So when I came on board, I really began to study not only what we had been through and haven't gone through that, and look at what was happening in other districts and states, and then came across something in my learning about belonging and dignity that made so much more sense in terms of where we want to go. So the first thing that I want to do is something that I think people get a lot of confusion about, and I want to talk about equality and equity. When we talk about, pardon me?
This is the number 1 point, so I'm glad you're touching on it.
Well, there you go. See, I read your mind. So equality asserts that every student should have the same access to a high-quality education. And we know that the Brown versus the Board case way back made certain that all students would be able to have accessibility to education, particularly Black students. But we do understand that equal access does not always mean equal access to content and or treatment. So we want to make sure that as we're making sure that everyone has equal access and opportunity, that they also have everything that they need to be successful. And that brings up equity.
I want to bring out the equality part of this because just giving every school the same dollar amount even doesn't work out to be equal, we found. And this goes back to when Kay Glasser and Dr. Fowler and Caroline Zucker was involved in some of this too, that when you give the same amount to all of the parents also add in. So like maybe we were given the same money to Emma Booker that we were giving to Pineview, but the Pineview parents could add a lot more. And that's where we got into the fight with the whiteboards and the projectors and all of that. And by having our referendum dollars, we were able to put more equality in so that all the schools were getting these draft boards and all of this. And so everything was working out, so everyone was getting equal. But even having everything equal, wasn't enough. And you're finding with our equity report where we're going one step
Exactly.
further. But I have to give a hand to, those who came before us, Dr. Glasser and Dr. Fowler, who was the superintendent, and then the referendum dollars has helped with the equity part.
Yes.
The equality part.
So when we talk about equity, we achieve equity when all students receive the resources, and this is what you were alluding to, Madam Chair. All students receive the resources they need so they graduate prepared for success after high school. In other words, just as you said, if School A has great resources and lots of things, and School B doesn't, then how do we make sure that those students are receiving, they have access to the same education, but how are we making sure that they're getting the resources they need to be successful? And that's what equity is. It just means meeting our students where they are, making sure that they have what they need, all students, to be successful. And that's woven throughout our strategic plan. Educational equity is a measure of achievement, fairness, and opportunity in education. And when we talk about educational equity, it depends on two main factors. The first is fairness, which implies that factors specific to one's personal conditions should not interfere with the potential of academic success. Where I'm born, how much money I have, what I look like, what my hair looks like, shouldn't matter whether or not I'm treated fairly in terms of what I get in terms of my education. The second important factor is inclusion, which refers to a comprehensive standard or a policy that applies to everyone in a certain education system. We have policies throughout our system that help us to stay on course and make sure that we're being accountable for what we are responsible for. So that's what that is saying. These two factors are closely related, and in order for us to see educational systems success in our system, we need to make sure that those are in place. So I want to talk a little bit about inclusion. Inclusion is the act or state of including or of being included within a group or structure. It's more than simply diversity and numerical representation. Inclusion involves authentic and empowered participation and a true sense of belonging. And then when we talk about belonging, it's the extent to which people feel appreciated, validated, accepted, and treated fairly within an environment, whether it's a school, a classroom, or work. So in other words, if people don't feel like they have a sense of belonging or that they're included, they're not going to perform at the same way, whether you're a student, whether you're a parent, whether you're a staff member. If you're not feeling a part of a thing, if we all sat here and Madam Chair was shut down every time she tried to speak, she's going to start feeling some kind of way. Our students go through that same thing in schools where they don't feel like, for whatever reason, that they're a part of it, that they belong, they're not called on for whatever reason. Then they go into a different place, and it impacts their achievement. Some folks call that a belonging gap. And when we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, belonging precedes achievement. But in education in general, we tend to put achievement before belonging. So how are we going to expect our children to achieve if they don't even feel like they belong, they're a part of our educational process and system? And so that's our focus and our framework is this belonging and dignity. So when we talk about dignity, it's the equal human value and worth, as well as an internal state of peace that comes with the recognition and acceptance of the value and vulnerability of all living things. In other words, it's that basic self-worth that we're born with. We should all be expected to respect one another's dignity. And respect, on the other hand, is something that is earned. We're not born with that. We have to earn that, and on both sides of that. And so, so I want to talk a little bit now about the educational equity policy. And this is how we're moving in this district to achieve that for our students. And I want to be clear that we're intentionally staying away from words and things that cause people consternation, that make them uncomfortable, because that's not what we're about and that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to make sure that every single one of our children and every single one of our parents have what they need to be successful. And not only them, but also our staff. That's a part of what's happening in every single goal of our strategic plan, that we're not just looking at our students and parents, but our staff. What are we doing to meet their needs? What are we doing to make sure that those teachers have the strategies that they need to address the needs of students that have, needs that are way up here that may be exceptional? And so in order to do that, we have to make sure that we are addressing that. So when we talk about why the need for an educational equity policy, here is why. Because what policies and procedures together provide a roadmap for day-to-day operations, just like any other policy. They ensure compliance with laws and regulations, and they give guidance for decision-making, and they streamline internal processes. And simply put, it just keeps our organization accountable for doing what we say what we're doing. If we say we're educating kids, then we need to be held accountable for that, all kids, all students. As stated in the feedback in the educational equity update, we need to shore up specific areas within our district with respect to students in general and specific targeted groups in particular, as well as recruiting and hiring more diverse staff and representing our district and those students and families within our district. In terms of adhering to the law, the Florida Department of Education and the Office of Educational Equity and Federal Government, with respect to our ESSA students, those are those students who fall under the Every Student Succeeds Act, we are required by law to meet those needs for those students. And in doing so, we ensure that they have the same and even better academic outcomes as all students. So some of the laws that are outlined are the Florida Educational Equity Act, Title IX, Title III, and Title VII. I won't go into reading all of those, but those are all addressed in the document that I went through earlier, as well as what we're doing in our equity policy. So the purpose of the policy is to ensure that all students are provided opportunities to receive the skills, knowledge, and understanding to succeed according to their individual abilities in higher education, careers, life readiness, and the community. Sarasota County School District employees and partners operate from and are accountable to the equity standards set forth in this policy, consistent with all applicable U.S. constitutional rights, civil rights, federal and state privacy laws, rules, and regulations. This policy promotes diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging within the school district, community with respect to race, color, national or ethnic origin, language, culture, gender, sex, gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, religious and spiritual beliefs, age, with the exception of those authorized by law, political beliefs, marital status, handicapping conditions, social and family background, or physical and learning disabilities. And the bottom line is our responsibility as educators is to create inclusive environments, intentionally fostering a sense of belonging in which the dignity of everyone is honored. And that is essentially what we're trying to do within this policy. The policy is designed to really bring all of the elements of what we do in education in this community together. That is what we do as an organization, within our policies as a district, within our strategic plan in terms of the goals and metrics that we have put together to achieve the goals of educating our students, as well as making sure that our students and our parents and our staff have what they need to be successful in their educational experience. With that, I will open up for questions from you all. I wasn't going to go through each and every line, but I can, because I know for this we lost some time here. So,
we picked up a little bit of time. I really want to commend you for taking something that I think could have been very controversial and getting it down to, no, we are going to meet all of the children's needs. And saying, these are the laws that say we do it. We're not going to do this for black students. We're not going to do this for gay students. We're not going to do this for somebody else. No, we're going to meet the needs of all students, regardless of their color or their orientation or whatever. And I really commend you for this policy. Thank you. Bridget?
Thank you. Well, I want to thank the committee, and I want to thank you, Dr. Moore and Dr. Asplin, for the work that you've done here. I agree with Mrs. Brown that I know that they had the potential of being highly polarizing or highly political, I don't know, whatever word you want to use. And I know I've seen a lot of different drafts of this, and I think it's come a long way. I think where I wanted to, two questions, and I've looked up this recently because I do agree. I think this has been something, whether we had a policy or not, it was really honing in to academic, particularly when you think about different schools, different classrooms, and the needs. And I'll use one of our elementary schools that I believe they have great leadership and there's not so much opportunity. But if you actually peel back that onion and you look at the retention of the teachers, the experience of the teachers, and the supports, it's not necessarily there, and that circumstantially, as I believe, is an impediment to the children's success academically. So when I think of when we're looking at meeting children and meeting our students and families where their needs are, when I think of our role as a board, a lot of, from a budgetary priority standpoint, those are things that I haven't seen us do as a district, where we look at a school specifically and say there's clearly needs here because we can't retain it, we can't keep staff, or they need additional support services inside the classroom because maybe there's a higher behavioral issues in those classrooms, and that plays a role in our supporting our staff of them being there, but it also plays a direct role in their academic environment. And so I don't know, I haven't seen us really dive in. I know, again, this has been something we as a board have talked about a number of times, but I've really never seen that addressed. And so from the get-go, that's where I've always supported this role, because I see there's an opportunity there. I do want to make sure that that's where it's narrowly focused, and I believe that's where you guys have delivered this, but that is kind of where I just, for anyone who's listening, or I know we've talked about this before, that is something I see there's opportunity, and I hope that that's where this gets driven, because it's solely based on the academic, and that goes to the staff, and it goes to our families, and it goes to our students. But those are things that I think we've seen for a while now, and it may be kind of similar to what Mrs. Brown said, is you're going to have families of all different socioeconomic status that can support their schools through their PTO or what have you. But it's our job and responsibility, particularly through the budget, the power of the purse strings, and prioritize to make sure those supports are there. So I'm very hopeful that that's really where we'll lead this, because I think that is going to have a direct impact on our staff, their ability to stay, and our students' academic success. My last one piece I did want to bring up is I've done some, and I still need to dive in more, but one of my questions is, when we look at other districts that have implemented an equity committee, an equity policy, various strategies, particularly focused on trying to close that achievement gap. Are you familiar with any success stories? Can you reference them?
Well, I think what I have found is a number of and I've been in touch with many in our state and even outside of our state. And interestingly enough, a lot of them are new. A lot of people are exactly what you're saying, and my vision and goal, and talking with Dr. Aspen when he brought me in, is exactly one of the things that he wants to do, is look at the resources, look at what every school has, and that's the next phase. I haven't been in a year, and trying to get out into the schools, and that's the next phase, is to say, hey, what is the data telling us? What is the data telling us? And I tell you, one state that I think is really doing well is Tennessee. They have an entire equity plan that is probably one of the most extensive plans that I've ever seen. I actually have their equity playbook. I'd be happy to send that to you, Ms. Ziegler. It is amazing, and it has many resources and supports embedded throughout the plan that is accessible to staff, accessible to community, accessible to anyone, where people can just actually navigate through it. And it tells you what those resources are and what the supports are. They worked with the state, and that's a state equity playbook. I think it was one of the ones I looked at first. And, of course, you have to crawl before you walk. And I think that eventually we could probably get to something like that, and that's what we're trying to build, and that's what they did. They looked at the data and what was actually needed based on resources, based on staffing, based on assessment data, and really began to hone in on what those schools and staff and what was needed from the district in order to be able to support those schools. So that is definitely, like, next phase is getting out into and doing more. I've already begun that process. I've already started meeting with some of the schools. I will be meeting with the executive directors to have some deeper conversations about things that are going in the schools, and also with the principals.
Thank you. And I'm going to be very brief because I know we don't have much time, and I want to be fair to my other colleagues. But the other but one, and I don't think there was enough data because they are somewhat new. And typically, I think 5 years is really when we
Yes.
start to illustrate a trend. But the concern was, when I started to research it, that a lot of the mid-size or larger districts, their achievement gap has actually grown, and so that's obviously not our goal. That's the opposite of where we want to go. And I just want to make sure, however we're focused on this, and I, again, have to dive in a little bit more. I'm excited to look at Tennessee, but that to ensure that the focus is truly on the right things. And so it concerned me when I saw the data illustrate that their achievement gaps have grown. I'll send it to you. It's, again, I don't think it has
Sure.
substantial data for, it doesn't, it hasn't hit 5 years. So to me, it's, the jury's
And
out.
I
but-
mean, you got to also add in that we've had 2 years of some COVID lag.
Yeah,
and-
this started in 2017. So, and then lastly, but again, I'm going to stop talking because I don't know if we're going to have much time, but was another area that I want to dive into is the professional development, but I'll let my other colleagues ask questions. Thank you so much.
Karen? Yeah, we do have to wrap this up.
Okay,
Get out
I
to
just
the
want to add
discussion.
in
Go ahead.
the key for me individually is the progress monitoring piece, and that we don't keep doing what didn't work. And I think that that is built in not only to the Department of Education with the new progress monitoring, but our strategic plan. That's my focus, that we see ourselves growing, and it's not in hindsight that we didn't.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I
Tom?
just had,
Oh, I'm sorry. Jane?
thank you. I just had a quick comment. I think this is the exciting point for you because you've gotten through the majority of the planning and the first steps, and now as you go to work with the schools, I think this is really, the exciting part, because then we know what each one needs and where we go from there.
Yes.
And, the testing is always, or progress monitoring, as we call it, is always important. That's not the important part for me. The important part for me is the relationships and how we're doing in meeting the needs of these students in those different schools. So I
Absolutely.
look forward to
Thank
that.
you.
And
The
I
timing-
think you're a great champion.
Thank
I think you're the person for this job, and thank you for the hard work you've had. You've had a lot of criticism. We've had memes on all kinds of things going on. And I want to say to you, you're the one, Sweet Pea, and you're doing a great job, and thank you very much for all you do.
Thank you, Ms. Goodwin. I would say that the timing is impeccable with the strategic plan being where it is, and being able to work with the goal leads and the strategy leads. So I've, kind of been split in lots of different, parts, but it's wonderful because I've been able to learn so much more about what everyone is doing and how we can do exactly what you're saying, because I'm in there looking at those metrics and those all of the activities that go along with that. So, we all get to keep each other accountable, and that's what this is about, so that we're all working together to make sure that we are achieving those goals.
Yeah, I'll just go quickly. I'm going to ask this question, but I'm not expecting an answer today. But I would like Dr. Asplund and Dr. Moore at some point to give us a benchmark of, just on a scale of 1 to 10, where are we on this equity policy today? And just give us a report card every so often. We're moving along, we're getting somewhere. That's a quick, easy way for us to understand that our work is measurable. Secondly, I just want to say also the word belonging was particularly impactful to me, because I've spoken to a lot of parents that are feeling that their students, because they're not part of our dual enrollment or our IB program, don't feel like they belong to the school because they don't get all of the special attention and all of the same with our ESE parents.
Yes.
So I use that word belonging as an extra barometer because our parents are asking for that, and we have to get them, to your point, where they are.
Absolutely. I think we all want to feel like we belong. I think we all want to feel like we're a part of something and that we're included. I'm a product of this incredible school district, and so I know both sides of that, what it feels like. From a personal note, my own children, my son, I have many children. I didn't birth them all. I only birthed one, but I have a whole lot of them. But I think the committee, Dr. Asplin and all of us, we put everything that we could in this to make it so that we could, you're not going to please everyone, but we really, really worked hard as a team to think about how anyone would feel if they were either looking at this, if they had a child that is invested in this, and really, really looking at building a really inclusive document to support what we do as educators. And I know, and my deep respect for each and every one of you and what you all do, I've spoken to all of you extensively, that your heart is in doing the right things for children. And I can't see that any other way. And so even in doing this, my thinking was thinking about what you were thinking in my conversations with you and sharing that with they'll tell you with the Equity Committee, it's like, no, can't go down there because my thoughts are your thoughts because of the conversations that we've had, as well as listening to people in our community. I respect passion, people's passion, because I have a lot of it myself. And I think that people should be passionate about what they believe in. I do think that when people are passionate, they need to be clear about and have good understanding of what it is that they're passionate about and have clarity and appropriate information about things that they might feel very strongly about. We are here to help people understand that. I know I am. I'm open to having conversations with people all the time about this equity policy, about the state report that we do, and anything else that might come up that they feel that might be something that is happening for them and their children that is inequitable. That's what we're here for. So,
Thank you. And
Thank
we
you.
definitely need somebody that's going to be on top of equity and as the laws change, because I know there is a law that changed. ACLU brought a case, and that so dress codes now can't be different for males and females. We have to have a dress code. But I've been invited to the Excellence in Education Summit that's going to be held over in Orlando Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And there's a lot of the equity, and one is on how blacks are doing in schools, and some of them, several are just equity and things like that. And I'll be sure to pick up some information.
thank you.
Is anyone else going to, this is the one that with Jeb Bush's organization? No? All right. Well, thank you very much.
you.
And we'll keep up the discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Our next item is redistricting. And I know we have a map to place up on the screen so everybody can see, but I know you also have your own printed ones as well.
Dan, did you want to weigh in on this? Dan reached out to Charlie Kennedy in Manatee County Schools, who used a map. We're getting copies of it, but it was just a tool that was out there that you could use. Now, I took it to the supervisor of elections, and they said they can't lay it over their precinct, so we might need to make minor little tweaks. But what our goal was, I believe, I think what you asked Charlie to do is what we're looking at. We don't want to change the districts. We just want to tweak them to adjust for the variations. And you can see that on the left-hand side, it shows, because we should all be about 86,000. Precinct 1, which it's a nice straight line, basically. It goes down to Bay Vista and then over to 75. It takes Fruitville and goes out to the end. And that's going to have the new Lakewood Ranch in there. District 4 is over by some, but District 4 also is landlocked and is not going to be getting any new construction. District 4 is from Bay Vista to Clark Road and up to I-75 and then out, and it takes in the Keys. That will not have any new construction. Now, District 3, 4, and 5, I'm not sure, because 3 right now is under. I'm not sure. Looking like that might have a couple of the new developments in it, but I want to check with our growth numbers. I tried to reach out and do that yesterday, but So there's a little of differences there, but some of that might be taken up by the new growth. And we could tweak a little bit because of the precinct lines when I get to talk with the supervisor of elections, where we can look at these. And this is the direction we're going. It does not move, everyone is still in their district. And it changes the lines a little bit from where they were. I don't know. And if you don't have this current map, you can go to sarasotavotes.com and go under, I think it's Elections District Maps, Sarasota County School Board. This is what it looked like before, and that's what it looks like now, what we're looking at. We're taking this line here and putting some more here and made some changes down in South County. We might have to tweak a little bit, but any tweaks to bring those numbers in, because one of the problems is what we've got left is very numerous precincts, either with a lot of space and not a lot of voters, or a lot of voters in small areas. But those things, Charlie Kennedy from Manatee County did this at Dan's request.
Right. So I'm very involved with the Florida School Board Attorney Association, and met my analogs in Manatee County. We've all been talking about the needs and requirements and details of redistricting for some time. We've all talked about the delay in the census data and some of the other issues that boards have been dealing with, and everyone is in this situation of coming up to the end of the year. The Florida statutes, as I mentioned, require that our districts, and our districts again are not single-member voting districts, right? All school board members are elected countywide. These are districts for purposes of where school board members should live. And so the Florida statute says that they should be equal as much as is practicable, and that you can and should reconfigure your districts to make them as equal as practicable, only in odd number years. People typically do that when the census comes out. So because it can only be done in odd numbered years, it should be done before the end of the year. So I contacted Charlie Kennedy, asked him for a no BS map. He said that should be pretty easy. And this is what we received.
And if any tweaks are going to be done, they're going to be done before the meeting in December, when we will be adopting the new map.
So this was created using publicly available software that some of the board members are familiar with. It's super useful. It's not a complicated matter, but this was really meant to be a point of departure for you folks to make decisions about what, if anything, you wanted to change.
And you can go in there, I believe, and play with some of the districts, or maybe it's just view only.
No, you actually can manipulate
You can play,
it
but
if
when
you'd like to do that.
you're not going to change what we've got here, because
I'm
you
not
don't
going
have
to,
the authority to make permanent changes.
so I'm not going to do anything, but if, and I promise you that, but one can make changes to the program if they've been given proper direction by this board.
And like I said, I will meet with, well, also, we want to look at the county commission. We don't want to make the supervisor election have to come up with a precinct that has, 20 voters in it, because our maps don't line up with the counties. Hopefully, they followed precinct lines, and we pretty much followed precinct lines too. But the only thing that I think we might do is do some tweaking to get 3, 4, and 5 more in balance.
Right. So you raise a good point. Precincts should not be split as much as practicable. Right. They should. The map should follow precinct lines as a best practice. The direction that I gave Charlie, other than no BS map, was I gave him the addresses of the school board members, said they should remain in their districts. and change the lines as little as possible, evening the district. So that
Yeah.
was really it. So there were a few other admonitions in the statutes, but that's really the lay of the land.
Yeah, the first map that we had took precinct 4, it cut it off at Stickney Point. And we went, no, we need to keep, Siesta Key together. I don't know what keys might be off of and it's hard to tell from this map, off of District 3, because we don't want to split a precinct. I think we might be looking at Minnesota Key, and we'd want to make all of Minnesota Key either in precinct 2 or precinct 3. We don't want to split that. So we'll look at that. And it's hard to tell on here, and I will work with the supervisor's office to make sure that we put all of Minnesota Key probably in precinct 2. I can't tell from this
Minnesota
map.
Key would be in 5. Minnesota Key Beach
Okay.
is near where I live.
All right,
It's in
what is
District
that
5.
south?
What are you talking about?
What is south of Siesta Key? What is
Casey
Key? Excuse me. I haven't been out of my house in a year and a half. I haven't been to these beaches.
Okay.
All right, so it's Casey Key that we'll be looking at. Sorry, thank you for correcting that. So I'll look up Casey Key to see where that's going to be on the new map to make sure that Casey Key is probably all in District 2.
Well, really realizing that we all run countywide, we're not single-member districts. Everybody votes for us in the entire county, all 100 precincts. So that's not a big factor. I looked at some of the options for county commission. I would like it at some point in time if the county commissions and the school board districts reflected one and the same, because people get confused. I remember when the sheriff's wife attempted to run against me in 2018, she thought she lived in my district. She did not. And it was a matter of blocks away, but I know that's confusing for some people. And in all interest of working collaboratively with the county commission, it would make some sense if we had the same districts. But this looks good to me with, tweaks or not. I think it looks pretty good. And it doesn't look like it was, it looks pretty consistent.
And that's that's what our direction was, and that's where we want to go. Tom.
I just want to, just so that we have enough time to sort of take this all in, I'd like to know if anyone is responsible for making tweaks, and then when will those tweaks be finalized so that we as board members have a chance to look at them before coming to the next board meeting and saying yay or nay?
Okay, I think I will be working with Charlie on that, and Charlie Kennedy and Ron Turner. I will get those to you. I'm not going to do it next week. I'm gone, and I'm gone the rest of this week. But when I come back, and honestly, they'll be very minor, because I think we might need to take in another precinct and it depends upon where Casey Key is. That's going to make a difference on whether we pick up. I think if you go over, we might even take 2 all the way over to 3 all the way over to the coast, the bay, end of the bay. So that would be a small, very, very, very small changes, because we're less than a precinct in most cases. And that's where we don't want to split the precincts, but I want to keep Fruitville Road as, if we have to split a precinct to keep Fruitville Road as a line, that seems to make sense, because we want to keep it, and maybe we'll keep other people to get lines following the streets. So I did receive some calls from some people about, well, why don't we do single districts like the county commission? And I talked to Charlie Kennedy. They did vote in Manatee County to have single districts, and it'll be in this coming election, I believe, or is it the next one? If we wanted to do single-member districts, we don't have to decide today. We would put it on, I would think we would want to put it on the ballot to ask if we want to do single-member districts. Some of that, I was told that you get a more, you understand, you get a closer relationship with the district you represent. The costs of school board races have gone from, under 10,000. I think the last couple of races were over 100,000 per candidate. And so, maybe that's something that we want to look at, but it definitely, we do not need to decide that today.
I hear that the county commission's interested in going the other way and
Well,
changing from single member to
the count.
running countywide.
Well, I think what they may be wanting to do for other reasons, but, we're hearing from parents who want to have a closer relationship, and I think the school board members would have a closer relationship with their district. And I just think, I don't want to make the decision today, and I just think it's something we might want to think about in the spring on how we would want to handle that. It wouldn't be this coming election. What it would be doing is putting it on the ballot for the coming elections. And I would just, I would not want to be changing the map. Again, if we do that, I think our maps should stay this way until we get another census, unless something happens, and like what happened in LA and LeBray came out and that sinkhole and just took a whole bunch of people away, then we might have to make some changes. But other than that, we should be able to keep them. And I would hope they would never get political. So with that, we are ahead of schedule if there's no other comments on this. Any comments on, but we don't have to talk about single-member districts today, unless you want to. Okay, then we are open to member comments. And normally we have 15 minutes, but we got an extra 5 minutes from this, so we got 20 minutes if you want it. Bridget.
I just have a quick question on the strategic plan. So help me understand where we are by way of implementation, because I know we had the workshop, and so when it comes to, is it being executed right now? Is it still in draft form? And the reason I ask is kind of where we play the role of both the evaluation, because I still think that's really important. We talked about that. We need to get that going. And then when we're talking, because when we build out our budget, it's an ongoing process. It's happening right now for the upcoming year. And again, kind of going back to what I said before, is a strategic plan, and as a board, we align priorities and budgetary priorities to that. So I'm just trying to better understand. I understand all strategic plans. You have a framework, you have your plans, your goals. I understand within that, you have kind of progress monitoring and seeing if you need to shift or change things, because if you're not, not to change the goal per se, but change how the execution strategy is. But as a board, when we are prioritizing and signing off on the strategic plan, but then, supporting a variety of things that come to the board to vote on, whether they be budgetary, whether they be materials, whether they be anything. I know I'd formally asked before, and I've seen other districts do that. I think it's Hillsborough, it's a couple of them. In there, right where it says financial impact, it aligns to the strategic plan. It'll say specifically which one. I'd like to see that, because I think that makes it, that's a constantly evaluating like the merits of what's being presented to us. So a couple questions in there, but I'm trying to better understand, like, when is the button being pressed go?
Yes, good, very good question. Thank you. I know we talked about this again at Cabinet yesterday, and what I want to see is for us to press that button before we leave for the winter break. We had a principals meeting this past week to give all of the strategic plan information to our principals and our assistant principals, and they were able to give us additional feedback, which is great. And so what you saw, the draft that you saw, is going to be pretty close to what we implement. But there are little tweaks that we make here and there. The other piece is that if you noticed in the draft, under the metrics part, you'll see metrics from now and then 5 years out. And so I had everybody, all the departments go back, because that's great. I had all the departments go back and give me the 1 year metrics so that we can work on the evaluation and so on. And then also, in order to make these strategies happen, what resources do you need? And so they've given me that, and Denise has that in a spreadsheet. So I'm working through that right now to try and make sure we understand what we need right now, what we would need next year and the year after as we spread that out, and what the cost might be. What are things that we just can't do? That just where it's going to cost too much money and we have to peel that back. That's also what I'm looking at. Also, what buckets are we going to take this out of? You know, so with ESSER money, it's non-recurring money. So obviously those materials and trainings and things like that we want to pay with the ESSER dollars. And then looking at our general fund for recurring so that we're not falling off a cliff after 3 or 4 years if we used ESSER money. So those are all questions that I'm answering currently, and I know we're all working on that very diligently. The other piece that you talked about was how does the budget apply to the strategic plan? And yesterday, Krista in our budget department, she's amazing, she and her team, we started having our budget talks for our departments, and they built that in. So when you are working on your budget as a department head and you are placing in your budget the cost of a certain item or what you needed to do, then gives you a drop down. Which goal and which strategy are we talking about on the strategic plan? So our entire departmental budgets will reflect the strategic plan and what parts that is going to take. But in the meantime, everything that I just said, kind of wrapping that up in a bow somehow and making sure that we're ready to go before Christmas break, that's my goal.
And, you know, we've been getting requests for copies of the strategic plan and the PIM. What is the PIM? I forgot what those letters stand for.
Yeah, I can't remember what it stands for.
What? What does it stand for?
I know what it is, but I can't remember what it stands for.
All right. Those will be, when somebody wants to find it fast, you can type in strategic plan, student progression plan, and those things will be there?
No, not with the PIM. So with the PIM,
Not the PIM, but
let me
the strategic
explain
plan
the
update.
strategic plan. But let me explain the PIM, please. Gosh, I know it is. So the PIM is the PIM is a live online vehicle for our staff to operate in and work on to create the strategic plan. It also helps us put data into the PIM, which then allows us to generate reports for progress monitoring reasons. So when we have progress monitoring workshops, for instance, on the strategic plan, we bring that to you to discuss it. The PIM helps us create those reports and move that data along so that we can show you the progress. It truly is for staff to utilize. It's live. It's live. So our different teams can go in and make changes to it, and it's live changes. And so so if anybody asks, and we have done this, if anybody asks to see the PIM, that's not a problem. We just have to make a copy, a read-only copy right at that point in time and send that to a person so they can see what that looks like if they want to see it, because in 5 minutes after that, it's going to change again if we're in there working on it. So that's what the PIM is. It's sort of like when you go in and get your brakes done. It's the manual to fix your brakes, and the people fixing your brakes are using that, but maybe not me. I don't need to see that. I just hope, just please fix my brakes. But it's that thing. But I'm not saying that people can't see it. I mean, we can certainly make that available. Just it'll be in a read-only form because we don't want to give everybody the live version of that.
Yeah, I was just
Chris?
Say it's the sandbox.
It's the sandbox. It's a sandbox that we play in and work in and tweak and revise and everything else, and it changes quite frequently. So that's-
Staff, define staff, because I think there's confusion with that. Are we talking about district staff or all schools?
No, we're talking about district staff.
you.
So we're talking about our goal leads. Thank you for asking that, Ms. Rose. Our goal leads, there's 5 of those, 1 for each goal, obviously. And then for each strategy, we have folks in that particular department and their teams of people who are working on those strategies, updating those strategies, and also, like I said, placing data in when we get to that point, placing data in from schools that we might place into the PIM that then generates reports, and then we can then report that to you.
Bridget?
Yes.
Oh, Tom?
Yeah, I just want to say I attended a PIM tutorial session. It's a live Google Doc, much like it's an amoeba. It constantly moves and changes. And what I've seen that the staff is using it as an accountability. Did you? And then you can check off that. It's as simple as that. But what I was really looking for, and I think it's yet to be devised, but I know it's in the process, is I want to know what's measurable, can drop out of it and hit a benchmark document for all of us to look at, for the public to look at, to make sure that what we say we're doing, and that is in play. But the actual document it's a live Google Excel-oriented document that if you're not technically savvy is going to be completely overwhelming.
And we're going to get updates from that information. Yes. And that's those updates is what the public would want to watch at our workshops, and we'll have access to because there will be documents at that time. Karen, did you want something?
Well, I just want to follow up. And I think the way I look at it is, I understand that was the meat and potatoes, the sandbox. I think it comes down to when we had our initial presentation, I know when you and I, Dr. Aspen and Corey, had our one-off, there were some goals that some had more specific metrics and some had maybe some higher level words, but not measurable. And I believe we were going to be getting something because from my role, I think responsibility to we're approving the strategic plan, right? So it'd be in front of us in December. Is that okay? So it's really, these sound great. How are we going to get there? I'm not going to manage it because that's not the board's role. But in order to sign off on a strategic plan, these goals look great. How are we going to do it? How are we assessing it? What are the tools we're assessing it? What are the material? I mean, there's a lot of elements that kind of that high level plan and I'm very excited about the budget piece. Like that's very much, thank you, Krista, wherever you are. But so having something like that really shows us, this is the meaningful part of the PIM. No, take the PIM out. Strategic plan, and because the strategic plan had some very high level items in it. So it's really, what are you kind of using for your team so that we can hold you accountable while you hold them accountable? Is that something we'll get before December?
I don't know if we'll get that before December, but we sure are working on that. That's my goal. That's my goal. So we talked about it again yesterday, and everybody's working on it as we speak.
Sorry, is it important?
No.
I'm not a question.
I was going to bring something up, and I totally forgot about it. So that's probably a good thing. Oh, I know what it was. The company to do our policies, because it would have been nice to have them look at this policy and give it a number, because does it go into board governance or does it go into something else? And then also the gentleman that was going to work with us, I think it was $1,000 a month, to look at board interactions and how they're acting at board meetings and giving feedback to you and us and those who want it, so that we can make the board run smoother. Are we moving forward on that? Yeah, that's a question to you.
So on Mr. Lee, $1,000 a month, and I know some do, some don't. I don't want to just pull the trigger on it and spend money on it if everybody doesn't agree on it. So I'm thinking that it needs to be something that the board would need to vote on and have an agreement as to whether we want to do this or not. Instead of me just saying,
right,
yeah, let's do this because, one person might want it or two people might want it, or maybe all of you do. I don't know, but I think we need to look closely at that and maybe have that discussion. I know that in talking with Mr. Lee, it was more of a something that you do on the telephone. It's not, he doesn't come out and do a retreat or anything.
Zoom.
You can do Zoom, you can do telephone, and he's there at $1,000 per month to talk through, board member stuff and help you with some of the questions that you might have or things like that. And so if you think that would be something that you would like to do, which I know it is for you, Shirley. But I just, since we are spending money on it, I felt that I shouldn't just make that decision for you, since it's really for you all.
You know, I think, and it's not just the 5 of us, because it would also include, you know, how people are coming in and how you are, because that would be 6, and even our attorney 7, you know, how we work together. I think the dollars spent, it's rather minimal, and, you know, the actions at the board meeting, I think it could help us. I know it could have helped me at the last board meeting when I went off on a tangent. But you know, giving us ways, because I mean, I've got another year here, and I would like to make sure that I'm performing at the highest level that I can. And I think it's a very small investment. He says we don't have to do it for a year. We can do it for just 2 or 3 months. And I would like to get that feedback. And I think it's a nominal cost. And, you know, we can see whether or not we like it. And I would think that, you know, after the board changes, maybe see how it works, you know, on a new board. But I think it could be very helpful to us.
Do you have any information about him? Any information on this program? I really have chatted with you about it, but not really.
I saw it at a meeting.
I can get information and send it to you if that would be helpful.
Please.
I don't know if he's got a website but we just talked to him, but yeah. Okay, with that, we're going to leave 5 minutes early and go to lunch and have an executive session, and then be back here at 2:45 for reorg and 3 o'clock meeting. Adjourn.